I'm going to call the Select Board December 16, 2024 meeting to order. I have a full house, and now I'm going to turn it over to the school committee, and they can call their meeting to order.
Call that Concord Carlisle Regional School District to order.
We can't hear you, Julie.
Maybe turn it on.
I'm going to call the Concord School Committee to order.
All right.
And I think Alexa would have.
Yep.
Call the meeting to order. She doesn't have enough voice.
I'll call the Concord Carlisle Regional School Committee to order.
Great. And last, Finance Committee.
I'll call the meeting of the Finance Committee to order. We do need a roll call.
You need a roll call?
Yeah.
Eric Dahlberg.
Here.
Lois Westman. Here. Don Cupcake here. Kathy Kupalo. Ted Geyer.
Here.
Paul Rodriguez.
Here.
Lindsay Liss.
Here.
Carlin Reed. Here online.
Online.
John Garriella. Suresh Bhatia.
You're not here?
Suresh is online. Kwasi Sadruzman. Sri Tupel.
Yep.
Peggy Briggs. Greg Garriella. Dee Ortner. We have a quorum.
Great, good. This is the third meeting that the Select Board has hosted with the School Committee and the Finance Committee to jointly prioritize our capital plans for the years going forward. So I appreciate you taking the time to come out during a Select Board meeting. We've also decided that tonight, since we think that the capital plan will take maybe 20 minutes or so, that we would take the extra time to talk about the Doug White Fields and also to talk about something that we're calling the land use matrix, which you'll learn more about later, which matches all of the land that's becoming available to the town of Concord, including MCI Concord, including 2229 Main, Peabody, and match that to the needs that the town has, including a DPW site, public works, housing. So we're developing a process to look at that more holistically, and we'll talk about that on the third item of our joint agenda. So let's start with the capital plan, and I'm going to turn it over to Anthony Ansaldi, our CFO.
Good evening. Thank you very much. Anthony Ansaldi, the town's Chief Financial Officer. So you'll be happy to know that this is brief, Mary, that my presentation will be about 5 minutes, 7 minutes, and then we have plenty of time for discussions and questions. So what we have up here is the FY26 Capital Improvement Plan. Ready? All right, I can go. Yeah, there's somebody still trying to access the meeting, Mary. So I can go on. I know the Select Board, FinCom, and the School Committee have the presentation. Or if you want to wait till we can share it on the screen.
So we can't share the slides because someone's trying to bomb us again? Yes. Okay. Okay, so let's go on without the slides.
That's fine. All right, so for those of you at home or in the audience, when you go back and you look at the Select Board's packet, the slide deck will be there. If anybody has any questions, you can always reach out, email me. Just go on the website under Finance, CFO, and feel free to shoot me an email. I'm happy to send you the slide deck. So tonight's agenda, we're going to talk about the overview of the FY26 capital plan. We're going to talk about the funding source, a little summary. then we're gonna get into the projects, not too specific, because I know that there's a capital hearing that the FinCom's gonna have on the capital plan, so that's where we'll get into more specifics, but I'm happy to answer any questions that anybody may have. So, first of all, for the funding sources, there's the capital outlay and Tier 1 came to just shy of $3 million, so $2.9 million. Tier 2 came in just above 4, it's 4.3. Tier 3 is also 4.3, and when I say 4.3, I mean millions.
Anthony, can you just quickly tell us the difference between the tiers?
Sure.
For the people who...
So the capital outlay is anything below $10,000 to $20,000 that are really a reoccurring capital that we've categorized and taken it out of Tier 1, which is any capital project that's below $250,000. So there's two phases of that bucket now. There's capital outlay, and then there's Tier 1. And that's the total that comes to the just shy of $3 million. It's 2.9. Now, Tier 2 is any projects that's $250,000 to $2.5 million. And with that, we have projects coming to just a little bit higher than $4.3 million. Now, Tier 3 projects are any projects that are greater than $2.5 million. And these projects require two approvals, because it's a debt exclusion project. So it'll require town meeting approval, and then you'd have to go to the ballot box to support the project. And then the rest of the funding sources are various different funding that we look at. One is Chapter 90, which is road work, which supplements the road work project. We have revolving fund balances that will make up about $1.6 million of the capital plan. We have some grant funding that our department heads were very creative in looking for grant opportunities to supplement our capital budget, and you'll hear a little bit more about that. And then there's various other funding sources, which you'll also hear what those are. So on this slide, it's just a really big Excel chart. I'm going to go through what we have. So on the cemetery, we have $400,000. That's all going to come from cemetery funds, whether it be the cemetery perpetual care or other funding sources, but not general fund revenue. For engineer, now, one thing that I'm sure some of our FinCom members notice is that there's two line items that actually exceed $250,000 that I put as Tier 1 capital. And the reason I did that is because we're going to have a road project, which is hopefully a 5-year, $25 to $30 million for roads. So with that, as you'll see, well, you can't see on the slide, but and Tier 3, you're going to see that we have $4.3 million on for Tier 3. But because that's contingent on town meeting and in the ballot, we still needed a contingency plan to continue doing our roads, because if we didn't do this, then we would be doing no road improvement work for a year, which just would make the problems that we have on our roads worse. So we have both phases in here. We have $2 million for roads as a Tier 2, and then we have the 4.3. Now, if the 4.3 passes at town meeting and at the ballot box, then we would be looking to rescind that $2 million borrowing at the next town meeting. So this is kind of a safety net for us in order to be able to continue to make our road improvements that our public works does on a yearly basis. The only other thing that I wanted to really point out under engineering is under culverts and bridges. Normally that is something that we'd be looking for money from culverts from our stormwater utility. Now, if you recall, last year at town meeting voted to establish the stormwater utility fund. Well, this year, I know that the Public Works Commission is working on a fee structure, and then Public Works will present a budget. And that's where we'd be trying to look to fund some of those capital projects. So right now, they were looking for $1.3 million, but we put $250,000 as part of the general fund, and then we moved the $1 million off, and we would look to support that out of the stormwater utility fund. Facilities, there's $750,000 for our facilities. One of the first asked that this would be as a first we'd be looking to do a feasibility study for a kitchen expansion at the senior center. So, and then the remaining funds would be used for upkeep of our public buildings, of which we have many that we're responsible for. From the fire department, I want to point out on the fire department, if you, under revolving fund balance, there's $550,000. So that's for an ambulance. So because last year at town meeting, we set up an ambulance revolving fund, what we'd be looking to do is, if you order an ambulance this year, it actually takes 2 years for delivery. So our intention is to pay for that ambulance out of the revolving fund in cash, paying in cash, because we feel that the receipts that we're going to get in the ambulance funds once we start ALS is going to exceed $1 million. So we'll be able to pay for that cash. But in order to place that ambulance, I have to have a funding source. So what we'd be doing is we'd be looking for town meeting to authorize us to borrow the $550,000 just so we can place the order, but we'd have no intentions of actually borrowing for that. We would pay for it cash in 2 years when that ambulance comes in, and then we'd look to rescind that borrowing. So that's just the way that we can't place any orders because we need a funding source per Mass General Law. Under highway and maintenance, again, there's another project for the Freightliner, $415,000 that I moved over from Tier 2 to Tier 1. And the only reason I did that, again, is to make room for the Tier 2 project for that contingency for the road work, the $2 million. The library, $90,000. A little off of $90,000. Natural resources is $15,000. Parks and trees is $10,000. Those last two are under the capital outlay. For the police department, the capital outlay would be $72,000. Tier 1 would be $60,000. And then Chief Mulcahy did a great job identifying the grant for the body-worn and in-car camera systems, and that was $50,000. Resources sustainability, we have to update our climate action and resiliency plan, so that's $75,000. And then the final is Concord Public Schools, of which $291,000 and change is for Tier 1 projects that they can speak to. And then on Tier 2 is $650,000. So again, the plan to wrap it up under capital outlay and Tier 1 is $2,948,520. Tier 2 projects would be $4,335,800. Again, $2 million of that we would hope that we wouldn't want to borrow for, which would ultimately reduce our Tier 2 borrowing or within the levy borrowing by $2 million, which was a goal of ours this year, was to borrow less for some capital projects. So if the Tier 3 road project proceeds and the voters approve that, then the Tier 2 would go down to $2 million, would be reduced by $2 million. Tier 3 is $4,350,000. That with the $650,000 that is coming from Chapter 90. Chapter 90 is roadwork money that the state gives us. So that plus the 4.3 is the $5 million that we'd be looking to have for roads improvements for next year. $650,000 I mentioned was Chapter 90. Then again, the cumulative between the stormwater utility and the ambulance revolving fund is $1.6 million. Grant funding was $50,000. And then other funding, which would be cemetery perpetual care, And then we also are using $297,000 of ARPA money to refurbish one of our apparatus, fire trucks. And the next couple of slides is what the schools have presented.
Anthony,
Sure.
can let me interrupt you? Let's stop there and
Sure.
see if there are any questions from the select board or the school committee on the town capital budget. The finance committee is having a hearing, a separate hearing.
Yeah, I don't know if we established that date yet.
January 9th.
In the area, okay.
So do you mind, Eric, if I just open it up for questions from these two committees, and then you can have the FinCom do their, in the interest of time? Great. Any questions from the select board? Go ahead.
Just very quickly, the revolving funds, I just wanted to make sure I understood what you said. The culverts and bridges for $1,062,000, is that coming from the new stormwater?
That would be, we'd be looking to borrow for that $1 million and then paying that debt out of the stormwater utility fund, yes.
Okay, and then similarly, the ambulance replacement, it's not really going to be borrowed, but because you got a 2-year window.
Exactly, I
Okay.
need, right, you
Okay.
got that.
Thank you.
Wendy? Any questions here?
Yeah, a couple. So thanks, Anthony, for the presentation. I'm curious how this compares in terms of total spend versus last year and versus maybe like a 5-year average. Are we spending more or less in total than we have been?
So last year at Tier 1 was $2.18 million, so we're up. But the Tier 2, we were at about $4.5 million, so we're down there. So our objective, Karen, this year was to go up a little bit on the cash, so we rely less on the debt and paying the interest. So that's why you see Tier 1 went up, but Tier 2, we expect to go down.
Okay. And in total, compared to like the 13.8, or I guess you're saying it would be 11.8 if we got the approval on the roads?
Yeah, you know, it's, before last year, we were really still coming out of COVID, and the town was spending a lot less on capital. So during those COVID years, we really fell behind. So we're definitely ramping up from there. So we're on the right trajectory as far as we're concerned, as far as handling all of our capital requests.
Okay. Yeah, no, just because, I mean, more capital means more debt, more spending, right? So then my second question then is just, didn't we just get an ambulance? I thought we just had one delivered.
There was, Chief Judge was telling me, I guess there was a time when Concord had to order 2 ambulances pretty much within 2 fiscal years, or maybe within 3 fiscal years. So I'm not sure if it was this year. I don't remember, Karen, but I know that there was a time like that there was 2 ambulances. Kerry, do you have any more on that one? No?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think it was at the last meeting that I announced that we did just take delivery on an ambulance, and it was 3 years in delivery time, in outfitting time, yeah.
Yeah, ideally, we're trying to spread those out 3, 3, and 3 on the ambulance.
Thanks.
You all set? Anthony, can you give me a little bit more detail around the $935,000 earmarked for pedestrian and bicycle safety?
So that's, I think Alan is here, and I'm sure he can speak to it, but I could, what I can tell you though, Mary, on this one is, this is an area even last year where it was a request for sidewalks, bike lanes, and it's something that we weren't able to really allocate a lot of resources to last year. And because of the Tier 3 project for roads, we were able to beef this up to be able to handle some of those, which will connect with the road project. Alan, you want to add?
Yes, hi, Alan Cathcart, Director of Public Works. Without the specifics, we've been asking for funds in that line item for a number of years with no funding. We've really fallen behind as far as ability to sort of catch up with the transportation, pedestrian, sidewalk issues. So we're trying to bundle, we understand there's different bundles of money, but we know there are champions in town who are really interested in making sure that that line item is funded. We want to make sure that that doesn't get lost in the roads improvement project, so that's why it's been targeted. We will be working with consultants as well as boards and committees to help prioritize where that money will be spent. The idea is to dovetail those with the roads program so that we're doing a project we can consider some of the other sort of externalities that we historically haven't been funded. So that's sidewalks, intersections, that sort of thing.
Okay.
Certainly, we get a lot of emails and calls about sidewalks and requests for sidewalks, so this is hopefully putting a little bit of dent into that, long overdue.
Okay, so you're able to do it because you're doing more road work?
Because of the TF3 project,
You're catching up.
yes.
You're catching up on road work, which enables you to do sidewalks.
Yes.
Okay. One last comment I have before we move over to the school committee. I like the way that you've listed all of our sources of funding and not just things that are going to come from property taxes. You're looking at revolving funds or Chapter 90. But I do see that you've got a column here for CPC funding. And I don't think the town has any capital requests in for CPC. But when we get to the schools, I think we should keep in mind that I think the schools do have a $500,000 request in for CPC for the Thoreau. So let's just keep that in mind when you're putting together your matrix. We'll talk about that when we go to the schools. Okay, does the school committee have any questions for Anthony about the town capital budget?
No questions.
Okay, great. Okay, Kent, you want to move on? Oh, you have a question? Go ahead.
One item, just in prep for the January 9th hearing,
Yeah.
I think 3 data points that'll be helpful when we take a look at this. One, implications for the debt capacity, and that gets to that pile-on chart we've been talking about, showing how old debt is, we're paying it down and new debt is ramping up. That's one. 2, implications on our levy limit and our levy capacity. And then 3, implications on the median residential tax bill.
Good. Very good.
Okay.
Thank you, Eric. Okay, do you want to move on to the schools? Are you going to do the schools, Anthony, or?
No, I think the superintendent Paul will speak to.
Sure, we're happy to.
Great. Go ahead.
In FY '26, we have targeted certain projects. At Alcott, we're looking at performance management system for the HVAC system and lighting. And some of what you'll see in green, if you're on our spreadsheet, we're going to be looking for other resources and funding sources, grants, et cetera, if the town decides to go forward with a vendor to help a third party become engaged. So some of these in green are not necessarily sure at this point, but we wanted to be sure to include them. The ones in yellow are the ones we expect to certainly go forward with. The middle school project does not have irrigation in it as of right now, so we've built that into this plan to be sure we're aligned with the second phase of the project, which will start in March. Some copier and office equipment. We've got a vehicle fleet equipment need at Knox Trail with the buses. We've scaled back our requests at Ripley. There's a bigger discussion to be had there, given the condition of the building, so we've just put in a placeholder for $15,000 worth of safety and an IT room that needs to stop freezing our servers, so we have to do the AC in there. Thoreau, we're looking at the roof, so you'll see $250,000 there. There's a study going on right now to determine the quality of the roof. We have some district technology needs. We've gotten behind at the elementary schools with devices and with projectors across the elementary schools, so we'd like to start to be able to move that forward along with what's in the operating budget. And then the vehicle is the pickup truck to replace a 15-year-old vehicle. And the total there overall is $1.5 million. The potential energy management ones that still are under discussion is $612. So the assured ones that will go forward in our request would be $941,000.
Very good. And again, that doesn't include the $500K from CPC.
Sure, we have a
If-
$500,000 application into CPC for Thoreau campus improvements, which we've had some really constructive conversations with the committee and are happy to answer any further questions. We also have private fundraising going on over there for playground expansion. CPC would focus on the field replacement. And we had a $200,000 state donation that's also going to subsidize the playground. So we're really tapping multiple revenue sources there rather than bringing it to this plan.
Thank you. Any questions from the select board?
I just had one, because I know the Alcott HVAC system has been on the list for a long time, and it's not technically funded here, right? Because it's on the green list, right? So is that a concern, and what happens if that energy management program doesn't go through?
That's the energy management, that's not a concern for this year. The system is operational. They are getting closer to the end of life. And we do find that if we're able to move forward with an energy management vendor, we would look into trying to fund it through that way. If we don't, then maybe 3 or 4 years down the line, we might have to bring it into our regular capital plan.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah. First, I appreciate the fact that there's a multi-year outlook in this. I think that's very helpful. I'm wondering whether you also have a cut at it that kind of does what Anthony was doing, which helps us position it in terms of capital outlay, tier 1, tier 2, that we could, so it sounds like some of the things like projectors, I would categorize that as one of the cash or capital outlay kinds of things that we would normally expect is going to be year over year, a certain percentage are going to be replaced.
The reason we didn't do that, which I'm sure is up for discussion, we have technology lines in the operating budget, which manages the year over year. These are what we feel are one-time reset the base costs. The projectors, if we replace them, that'll be a cost that doesn't come back every year. But we're open to discussion, Mark, on some of these.
Yeah, it's sort of in the spirit of trying to normalize the comparisons, because I would also recognize that we didn't, I think in IT we see the computer replacements, for example, for the town, and those kinds of expenditures being incorporated in there, so I'm just wondering whether there's an opportunity to...
There is an effort to align and get to exactly the same place down the line. Right. We're not quite there yet. For example, our buses are still in our operating budget.
Yeah.
We do have a subtotal at the bottom of what tier 1 and tier 2 is. We could look at format next year to kind of present it differently, but we do have tier 1 and tier 2 totals identified on our report.
Yeah, I think it might be, especially to the extent that there are items in the school budget that we would recognize as capital that aren't sort of being captured in the capital plan, would give us a better feel for what the level of capital expenditure actually is if we could just sort of pull those in at the end and then compare them.
Yeah, we definitely talked about that when we met with Anthony and Carrie, and we decided to leave apples to apples more than less this year, just to help people see the plan coming together.
Right. Thank you.
Cam, if you have a question?
Does this include the high school? I'm a little trying to
No,
follow.
that comes next.
Yeah, we're going to move to that in a minute.
We're going to do that as soon as we're done here.
Got it, thanks.
Any other, Eric, do you have any?
FinCom questions on the CPS capital plan? I think we're good.
Okay, good. Let's move now to the high school. CCRSD. Julie, you're going to walk us through that?
Yep. So I apologize, I have laryngitis, but I'm going to push through it, so I might sound a little funny. So first of all, thank you everyone in the audience. I know it's a busy week with the holidays around. Thanks for coming out. Last week, the Concord Carlisle Regional School District approved a design that meets for this. I'm sorry, should back up. We're talking about the amenities building. That is the capital project that we have at the high school. It's been discussed for quite some time now. We've made significant progress. If anyone needs a copy of it, the choices are in the room. We can happily pass that around. So coming back to that, last week the regional school district went through these choices and we approved design 3A that you see up here for a number of reasons. One, it meets the plumbing codes. Some of these did not. Second is it best meets both towns' sustainability goals for both Concord and Carlisle. You'll see that, for example, in options 1A and 1B, they only have a useful life of about 10 years. It would make, and there's no recycling option. They would just be put into a landfill. The third is that we have the ability for school groups to use the space that you see in option 3A to do fundraising to offset the cost. And ultimately, 3A has the best return on investment for the town with longevity, materials, and a number of other reasons. The budget for this plan is between 1.5 and 1.8 million. Given the feedback that we got last year, we did form a subcommittee earlier this year that represented Alexa and Tracy from Concord and Brian Watterson from Carlisle to really exhaust other funding sources to offset taxpayer burden. And I'm going to have Alexa go through that in just a second. But we've also met with Mary and Carrie from the town and the select board to see how we can pretty much come together and look at CPC, rec fund money, or other sources, given that although the building will be managed and live on the CCHS campus, this is really a community space. The usage is about a 70-30, so 70% either recreation or town sports, 30% CCHS athletics. And we really want to make sure that not only the athletes that are using these fields, but more importantly, looking at this in a multi-generational way. We have spectators and a number of other folks that come to the campus, and we want to make sure that they have access to bathrooms. And we really want to look at this as a collaborative project with the town. And yeah, so I'd like to hand it over to Alexa to give just an overview of what we've been doing to pursue other sources of funding to offset the cost.
Sure. So our work group has focused predominantly on, like Julie said, trying to find alternative revenue sources for this project to decrease the burden to the taxpayer. So we've focused really on 5 areas. We've worked with Representative Cataldo and Representative Gentile on identifying ADA municipal grants. We had a productive meeting with Lori Trahan's chief aide to talk about potentially getting an earmark in the upcoming budget. That won't sync well with town meeting, but we could, as we all know, we can always lower the cost to the town. So if we were to get that, she gets about 15 or so projects in her district that she can identify. We have also been working with Senator Barrett, same thing, kind of municipal grants. And then we were looking at some of the local resources we had in town, and the 3 sort of there we looked at were possibly partnering and collaborating with the CPC or the Recreation Fund, or finally looking to the town manager to see if there were any reallocations she could make with ARPA funding. Our goal is just to work cooperatively with everyone. Some of those town resources in particular we know are already funded. So we're hoping that some of those existing funds could be allocated to this project, again, to just reduce overall burden from the taxpayer. I think, we've really had a great communication with the Finance Committee this year, and so I know one of the things that we are looking to do is look at any resources that we can find that are not taxpayer focused. So that's sort of where we are, and where our work will continue to go in this little working group that we've created.
Great, thank you. I'll open it up to questions from the select board. No? I have a question. What makes the difference between, what is in the $300,000 split between the 1.5 to the 1.8? What will make it?
This range, so the 1.5 to 1.8.
Well, part of that is until we get a full design, knowing there's some variability too also in the bid process. So they provided a range for kind of a basic structure. We've also talked about inside having concessions, potentially having a training room. So it depends on what's included in the facility. And it also depends on what the market bears when we go out to bid.
So some of it is decisions as far as what you want in the building.
I mean, when we asked that question to a limited extent, but the space that we're talking about for concessions and even a training room,
Training, right.
it doesn't as Bob kind of alluded to in our meeting last week, it doesn't change the overall cost all that much. I expected that materials would be a bigger driver of cost rather than the actual use of the space.
Then I guess my question is, how much can we control that so that it stays closer to the 1.5 versus the 1.8?
I don't think we can control, I mean, there's a bid factor too. I mean, we're gonna, when we go out to bid, it'll depend whether there's competition for the project or not. You know, we'll do what we can, and we'll work with the consultants to see if there's things we can do to end up at the lower end, but we don't have complete control over the price.
But you'd have some control over the design, for example, like you said, the training room or things like that, if it came in. If you go out to bid and it comes in at closer to the 1.8.
I think too at our last meeting, and I don't want to speak for everybody, but I think I can reliably say, and anyone can obviously rewatch it, I think we've all made a pretty clear commitment to making this the most boring, the most simple design possible to ensure that we are looking at the lower end of the spectrum in terms of, again, to your point, what we can control.
Right.
We can't control the bids, we
Right.
can't control,
Yep.
you know, inflation and materials, but to the extent that we can make impact, nobody is asking for much of anything except for people to be able to use the restroom.
Yeah, I know.
It's probably also worth noting that the committee's paid for the schematics, which is what you've got in front of you. Next step is a design that they've already procured and is being worked on. So I think as the design gets fine-tuned, which is what Gale Associates is doing right now, the cost is going to, you know, the window will get smaller there too.
Great.
So that this is a schematic cost just as well as a schematic design.
Okay.
First stage of the process.
So maybe just one point. I did a little research on it from the last meeting. I found Westford Academy, I think, recently put in an amenities building, and my understanding is the cost, it was about 3 years ago, so just for reference, the cost was $1.34 million, and they had that entirely funded from CPC funds. So just for maybe considering that as an option, but I wonder maybe even if we know anybody in Westford, maybe we can get some relevant, you know, comparisons, or maybe we've already done that.
We actually visited Westford Academy last year and talked to their AD extensively. And even with the consultants, I'd asked the question, can we buy the design from Westford to save money? And we actually cannot do that because every design, every site is different. So we definitely look to Westford as an example. I mean, you could pretty much substitute Concord into the articles that you can find online about the Westford project. So they were in exactly the same situation. There were plumbing codes. Obviously, the cost is a problem, but it was 100% funded by their CPC.
And I noticed that our CPC traditionally uses an annual grant cycle, but when I looked into sort of the Mass General Law on how CPCs are operating, a CPC can accept grants on a rolling basis. Concord traditionally doesn't, but we were hoping to have some conversations shortly about whether, given that my understanding is that applications this year were low to the CPC, there weren't a lot of them, that potentially because they were allowed to, that they might be interested in reopening their grant process so that we could have these offsets in hand prior to town meetings so that a warrant article could be more accurate in the costs.
And you would include it in the CPC warrant article?
I'm sorry?
You would include it in the CPC warrant article money for this project? So you'd have to convince them to include something.
So yeah, so we're
Okay,
hoping to
on their agenda?
initiate some conversations.
Yeah, are you on their agenda?
What?
The CPC agenda? Are you on their agenda to talk about this, to get money from CPC for this project?
No, not yet. We're starting to sort of ask the questions, and I know they've discussed it once or twice, I think, in their meetings. They've already brought this topic up.
Okay.
And Carlisle also has a CPC, and their deadline is different than the Concord deadline. So their deadline is more like January. So it's, you know, we're in a tricky spot with two different deadlines.
Well, yeah, the thing I'd just like to point out is that the deadline for Concord is February 19th. So if CPC is going to entertain an application for this project this year, they would need to know before they put their article on the warrant, right? So just so, you should talk to them soon, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, we
Just talk to
couldn't,
them
I don't
really
believe,
soon.
without a design, so I think that was our problem.
Okay.
Because we couldn't create a schematic before town meeting, and we did not get these schematics back till October.
Okay.
So, just that, again, the timing just being,
I like the idea. I mean, just speaking personally, I like the idea of asking CPC.
Yeah.
It's just you're in a time crunch. Okay.
Yeah, I think the only last thing to note is that just because this is a two-town vote, Carlisle, which I understand is not traditional, we go first. I am a Carlilian, so we have to get a warrant passed in Carlisle before it goes to Concord, and that's why the overall, you okay? Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
I know I'm not my usual loud self. Really sorry about that. But yeah, I think we just want to be mindful of is bringing the total cost down. So I think to Alexa's point, we want to be at the bottom. Carlisle has no business base, or virtually none, I should say. So any extra cost, especially this year, is going to hit very hard. So we want to make sure that we take that down as much as possible.
Thank you. Thank you. Do you have any questions, or should we move on?
Any FinCom questions? I think we're good.
Great, great. Okay, let's move on to the Doug White Fields.
All right. Good evening. Good evening. I'm Carrie LaFleur, the town manager, and I do realize we are running way over on time. I do have just a short presentation, and hopefully there'll be time for some questions. I wanted to introduce our team members who are here in the audience, both in this room and online. From Concord Public Works, Alan Cathcart is here. Online, Aaron McCloskey and Eric Shaw in our Highway and Grounds division, and they are the gentlemen who are primarily responsible for maintenance of Doug White Field. From Recreation, over in the back corner, we have our director, Lee Jackson. I saw our Rec Commission Chair, Phil Griffiths, here, and I know we have at least one other Rec Commission member here. Jess Porter, who is our Assistant Town Manager, also in the back, and she oversees Human Services, which includes Recreation. And then in the Town Manager's office working on this project, Megan Zamuto, the Deputy Town Manager. Our Sustainability Director, Eric Sims, is here, and I wanted to acknowledge my Executive Assistant, Amanda Moore, who's been most helpful in putting the presentation together. So next slide, please. So I just wanted to start with a location overview, and probably everybody who is here knows where the Doug White Fields are, but we have made the mistake of talking about projects and properties, and people didn't actually know where they were. So the Doug White Fields are two artificial turf fields that are located on the CCHS property. The primary users of the fields are the high school and the various groups that comprise the Friends of CC playing fields, and they are listed here. There is some very occasional use by the town's recreation department. And I did note on this slide that the current surface of the fields is crumb rubber. Again, the fields are maintained by Concord Public Works. With all of the funding for maintenance, both operation and anticipated replacement, coming from the Friends of CC Fields. Next slide, please. All right, so current conditions. We do have the fields inspected annually by a third party. TSI LLC is the group that inspects the fields. The last inspection is dated September 5, 2024. And according to the inspections, you can see for, did we skip over the soccer fields or? No, okay. So the current conditions of both of the fields are about the same. So the Gmax average is 148 for the soccer fields. The infill depth is 29 millimeters. There are notes that the field is deteriorating. There is tearing and ripping and accelerated wear. If we could flip to the, okay, stay here at the football field. So about the same at the football field. I'm not going to get into the Gmax average or the depth of the infill, but there are people, my friends online can answer those questions if you have that. The bottom line is that both of these fields are approaching end of life. I know there are some people who are saying they are at end of life, they are past end of life. What I can tell you based on the inspection is that they are approaching end of life. So it's time to decide what we're going to do next. If we could go to the next slide. So, you know, here's where it gets interesting. I've been with the town since 2016. I was not here back in 2007 and 2008. So we're pulling information together based on what we're seeing in the files. I bet a lot of people here in the room were here back then and know a lot more about this than me. But what I will say is we have two stakeholder agreements. We have what I've identified as the governing agreement that was signed on June 15, 2007, and this is the agreement between the town and the school district. And this outlines the permitted use, the priority of use, the original construction and maintenance, again, assigning maintenance to public works, assigning scheduling to recreation for use primarily by the high school and the groups that are part of CC playing fields. What is not included in the governing agreement is anything about replacement of the fields, right? So this is where it's just a little complicated. So there's nothing in there. So then the next agreement is the partnership agreement with the Friends that was signed just a couple of months, well, actually a year and a couple of months later. This is a memorandum of agreement between the town and the Friends. And this outlines the maintenance of the field and funding. Again, it calls out maintenance is by the town, and that funding is by the Friends, both operations, and there's $50,000, a minimum of $50,000 a year for operational expense, and a requirement that a capital reserve to replace the artificial turf be included. And that was set up, and that has been funded on an ongoing basis, and I understand there's to date about $1.5 million in that field. And it was assumed, the capital reserve was set up with an assumption that there was a 16-year life on the field. So next slide. Again, more interesting things. So there are a lot of challenges here. I want to mention, we just spent quite a bit of time going through the capital plan. We have not allocated any funds for replacement of the Doug White fields in the capital plan, because the MOA with the Friends has the funding for replacement of the field, and the assumption, the working assumption has been is that is the source of funding to replace the fields. The replacement relies on timely contributions from the Friends, and again, there is money, maybe not 100% of what is needed to replace, but hopefully pretty close to that. Some of the other challenges in consideration, there are long lead times for turf materials. And staff has identified that perhaps even as much as 12 to 18 months. So we need to get on this. Community input is not a challenge, but a consideration. We know there are people here in the audience this evening on both sides, people who support replacement as is, or perhaps with maybe a more environmentally friendly artificial turf, and I think there's been a lot of advancement in the last decade or so, but I'm not an expert. And then there are people who would prefer grass fields, right? So we have to take that input into consideration, and we have to coordinate, and we have to be doing that now. So next slide, please. I just wanted to mention the turf moratorium. And it gets its own slide because we had a lot that we wanted to include. So we are currently under a 5-year moratorium that was approved by annual town meeting May 1st of 2022. It extends through 2027. But it does specifically exclude the Doug White fields and the stadium field. So that's something that has to be considered as well. And that, you know, I know we've had a lot of discussion about the number of people that attend town meeting. We have a lot of people that attend town meeting, maybe not as many as we want, but this was a vote taken by a lot of people that were at town meeting. So that has to be taken into consideration. So next slide. So we've just here identified a path forward. And a lot of these things really have happened kind of informally. But first, we note that Public Works needs to notify the stakeholders that it's time to replace the fields, and they've essentially done that. Notification to friends, friends, get ready, we need to access funding. That has happened, I think, informally. It certainly hasn't, there hasn't been anything formal. We've received requests from users for sure. We've been getting a lot of emails over the last few weeks or months that users are interested in field replacement sooner rather than later. So I've put in here Town of Concord as lead agency. In the intergovernmental agreement, because it doesn't talk about the replacement of the fields at all, it doesn't specifically say that the town is the lead agency. The town was the lead agency in the original construction. I'm going to assume here, based on conversations that I've had informally with people, that there's an expectation that the town's going to be the lead agency. So we have to follow a procurement process. There is state law that governs how we procure just about anything. So that's something that has to be taken into consideration. And then the assumption would be that the town as the lead agent would be, again, handling the procurement and overseeing the project execution. Next slide, please. And I'm getting to the end here. So proposed timeline, we would be looking at replacement summer 2026, and our staff that maintains the fields believe that that is reasonable. Certainly it would be great if we were ready to do the work this summer, but they feel that we can, that this timetable is reasonable. So we're here at step one, notification and preparation, where we're talking about this because there's a lot of interest here. We would expect to hire a design firm, and we would expect likely to use Gale and Associates. They are known to the school, currently working with the school on the amenities building. They are a leader in our area in this field, and we would expect to contract with them. We actually have reached out to them. We have a proposal that we, or maybe just at the beginnings of a proposal expected from them this week. So then we would, assuming that we get them on board in the next month or so, once we get past the holidays, they would be working with us through public engagement. And this is where we've talked about a feasibility study. So the feasibility is pretty tight here. For a project like this, Gale and Associates, anybody who's doing this work for this level of funding, the community is always going to ask for an analysis, right? You want to make sure what you're doing is the right thing. So they would be looking at replacing like for like. They hopefully will be proposing an alternate, a better artificial turf infill that is more environmentally friendly, and we're hearing neighboring communities are working, I think, with wood chips. I've seen other materials. We will be looking at those. They will also do life cycle costs on grass fields. So we have all of that information. We can make the best decision. And then we would go to scope and development, where they would design and put together the bid specs for the final project. And then we would go to design approval and construction. And then just the final slide here. Again, just want to point out that the fields are near the end of their useful life. Community engagement and close coordination among stakeholders is essential. The town is targeting replacement for summer 2026. The expectation is that the replacement will maintain an artificial turf field consistent with the original field design and existing agreements. But again, we would be taking into consideration the alternatives to make sure that the best decision is made. And then finally, I wanted to note that there were a handful of questions that were asked that really were legal questions that we sent to town council, who drafted a legal opinion, and we did release that, so that is public. It's part of the agenda packet, and hopefully that answers questions on those particular topics. So that's the end of my presentation.
Thank you, Carrie. Any questions, comments from the select board?
I guess, Carrie, what would be your expectation for timeline? It sounds like you've already outreached to Gale and Associates.
Yeah, I would hope we would have the designer, whether it's Gail or somebody else on board, at least within the next 2 months. You know, it's the holidays, so it's a little tough. And then we would start in earnest. And I don't think it's going to take them, I'm looking at Anthony because he's done the outreach to Gail. I don't think it's going to take them a whole lot of time because this is, every community that is facing replacement of a turf field is asking the same questions that are being asked here. The same concerns that are being raised in this community are being raised in other communities. So they have this information readily available, and they are able to move fairly quickly through this process, making sure that they're taking feedback into consideration.
And so how would you envision the feedback in sort of the design process? You said they're collecting information. Would that be a presentation to the select board, or the rec department facilitate it? How would you envision the public process or input?
You know, not to put the Rec Commission on the spot, but I would love to partner with the Rec Commission and have this project come up through the Rec Commission. They are the individuals who are far more knowledgeable than we are on these topics. So I would like to jointly sponsor whatever public meetings with the Rec Commission.
Great, thank you.
I have a similar question, actually, which is when would the appropriate time be for the public to give input, for the Climate Action Committee, for I know our Sustainability Director is here tonight. Would that be once we're meeting with Rec Commission and we have these 3 options? You said like for like, better, more environmentally friendly, or grass. Do we wait until we have those 3 options and then we have public input?
Well, I can tell you nobody's waiting. We are getting public input, and I think people should provide, if you're ready to provide input now, please do so. You know, without having the designer on board and outlining the timetable, I can't tell you that on, you know, March 3rd we're going to have a public meeting, but we are going to be working on this through the winter into the spring so that we can keep the replacement on track for summer 2026. So we will keep the public updated, but...
Right, well, I'm just thinking about time tonight, and it does seem like we might need a whole meeting with the Rec Commission or whoever to get all of this public input. But that's up to Marion. But my other question is the disposal cost. Do we have any kind of, is this something Gale Associates will be working on, and how do we have funding for the disposal costs?
So yes, that is part of the project. Replacement, you know, soup to nuts, design, replacement, removal, removal, replacement, disposal. That is all, will be all part of the project costs.
So the 1.5 million that is in the fund now may be enough for replacement and disposal, we're hoping?
Yes, it may be enough.
Okay.
So,
No. Can we hold off on comment,
Yeah.
please? Thank you.
so I don't like this plan at all. Just to be blunt, it sounds like we're not making a decision. It sounds like I'm not sure I understand the concept of the feasibility study. I'm not sure what we're studying. At one point you said we're going to replace the turf with turf, and then you went on to say that we're going to look at different options. So I'm just going to make a couple of comments, right? So we have been getting a lot of feedback from people regarding this issue. I will tell you that I went and counted today, and we got 48 letters to the select board, and 44 of them were in favor of replacing the turf with turf. So there's one data point. We have $1.5 million available for turf and only turf replacement. And if we don't do that, then it's going to fall on the taxpayers, right? There's actually nothing stopping us from moving ahead. There's no legal agreement that says you can't do this. There's nothing that says you can't move right away. You can go ask suppliers how long it's going to take and when they're going to get the materials and what type of materials they're going to use. You can tell them that you will include environmental impacts in that in evaluating their bids. So there's nothing stopping us from moving forward other than our own, we just want to meander and spend a year and a half kind of staring at the problem again. So the field condition reports are very clear that the turf is not in great shape, and if you straight line the performance on those fields, that they will start to fail in 2026, okay? So we can go into all the science behind it. I don't think we need to. Just draw a straight line from here's every year, here's the performance, here's how it's deteriorating, and here's when we're going to have a problem. So we're not talking about doing something where we're creating new artificial turf in town. We're talking about something where we signed an agreement with people to do this, and I have no idea why it is that we're waiting and not moving forward as quickly as possible.
Did you want me to respond?
If you want, do you want to, or do you want to just?
I think the only things I would say, one of the last things that I said was the expectation is that the replacement will maintain artificial turf. There is a design process. We don't have anybody on staff that can draw up the specs for the replacement of the artificial turf. So we do have to work with a designer on the project.
So I have a question. Given, if we worked on the assumption that we were talking about a project that ends up getting funded by the youth sports who've been collecting money for this replacement for years, and that was going to fit into the parameters of the existing agreement, is there any reason why there needs to be any kind of gate either into the town budget or from a town meeting action in order to enable that to go forward? Or is this a project that we can think about as being disconnected from that normal budgeting and capital allocation cycle because it is governed by this public-private partnership?
Yeah, I'm not seeing any need for any town meeting action on this, again, because the funding is available, and it's available through, it doesn't need to be appropriated through any town means. I don't see any official action needed by the select board, and again, I mentioned just working with the rec commission through this project, so there's some window into what's happening because there's an interest in what's happening. But I wouldn't expect this to be slow-rolled.
I want to make a comment that I think we are moving forward with this, and one of the reasons why it's taken a while is because it was kind of unclear who owned this project. If you remember, these fields are on property that is not owned by the town. These fields are on property that's owned by the district. And last year, you might remember that the Solar Task Force proposed putting ground-mounted solar on some of the property that the district owned, and they were told that it's inappropriate, and they were told it was inappropriate for the town to be proposing things on district property, and they were right. So we take that information and we say that if we're going to make changes to land that the town doesn't own, that the district doesn't own, then it became a little bit, well, who's taking the lead? And I would really like to commend the town manager for standing up now and actually taking the lead and saying, yes, we are going to take the leadership for this project, and we are going to have a study, and we are going to start today to get the people on board so that we in fact have the right turf there in the summer of 2027. So the reason why this, one of the reasons why, 26, sorry, 26. So one of the reasons why is because we've been kind of unclear who owns it, and now we're finding that the town is in fact stepping up. So I really think we owe the town manager some recognition, and thank you for that.
I do want to make a clarification because I'm going back to my notes from July of 2024. Section 17, acceptance of the premises in the agreement between the school and the town, clearly states that the district shall not be responsible for any costs associated with the design, construction, or maintenance of the premises, and no representations or warranties expressed or implied respecting the condition of the premises, and no premises after.
That's the cost, right? But-
That's the full overview.
Well,
That is one thing I just want to be clear on. I think
Okay,
that has been fairly clear.
okay. Our legal counsel has basically said that we have the right but not the obligation to replace the fields. And I think we're right now exercising the option, so I don't want to get into an argument, but I
No, I don't
do
either.
think,
I just wanna be clear.
that given what we're hearing tonight is that the town is taking the leadership role in that and getting the feasibility study and getting the community input and working with the Friends so that in fact we do have fields.
But it's not what Kerry said, okay? So we're going to do a study. We're going to do a study on whether or not we use turf.
No.
Hold on. Okay, so if we want to replay the tape. So are we deciding we're going to replace the turf with turf and we're going to move forward as quickly as possible to do so? If everyone agrees with that statement, that's fine. That's not what was said. Kerry, do you agree with that statement?
So what I said, and I think the presentation is pretty clear, that we will be working with a designer because we do not have the expertise in-house, that a part of the process with the designer will be an alternatives analysis.
Okay. So that's not the same as replacing turf with turf. That's a feasibility study.
Town manager, Cameron, if you'd let her finish.
Sure. Go ahead.
Well, I don't want to repeat myself, but again, the last thing that I said in the presentation is the expectation is that we would be replacing the artificial turf with artificial turf. I think the hope of probably most people is that perhaps there is a more environmentally friendly artificial infill, and there are other communities that have had success with that. That may not be the case, and again, we don't have funding in our capital budget to replace the fields, and I wouldn't expect that the town would be taking on that cost within the capital budget when we have an agreement that clearly outlines the capital reserve that was required, and that agreement was fulfilled. And there is a process with any public project that we have to go through, and it does take time, and the path that we have outlined, the timetable we have outlined, we believe will meet the requirements, and the field will be in working order until summer 2026 when it can be replaced.
So, thank you, Carrie. I guess the other clarification I would say is that as part of the design review, you'll have a much better sense of cost as well, including replacement costs. Because I guess my concern is, I'm not sure 1.5 million is enough, to be honest, with the replacement cost, which I know is also part of what the Friends expense disposal. Yeah, replacement, yeah, that's what I meant. So I think design is important, and we do need to look at the other environmental options. So I think we're moving forward, and that's good. So, and we'll get more information through the process, and we'll look forward to the recreation or whomever's going to run the next meeting, information session on next steps. So.
Any other questions from?
Well, I'd just make a comment that, you know, if we engage in a thought experiment, fast forward 15, 16 years from now, maybe there is a better material than the types of materials that are available today. An alternative analysis at that point for whichever field is being replaced at that time should consider whether or not there is a better material, one that might meet our sustainability goals, might meet the needs of the users of the field for its performance characteristics, as well as the health and safety of those children, primarily, who are using these fields. And so it would be irresponsible that at any point in time, when the replacement of these fields is being considered, not to look at the various alternatives before rushing out to write a check for exactly what was already there.
You had an answer to an earlier question.
So I'm sorry, my name is Eric Jarnrid, and I'm from 61 Harvard Street, and I just wanted to just speak really briefly. I was actually the representative for Friends of C.C. Fields during the whole reconstruction process, the construction process that was 16 years ago, and I wanted to point out it was an incredibly cordial and collaborative effort that took place. At the time, Barry Haley was athletic director, Rich Rain was the head of DPW, and we would have weekly meetings at the high school to implement the construction of the fields. And so as Friends of CC Fields, obviously we have a responsibility to all our athletes to make sure that what we are agreeing to do on behalf of them and of the town is something that makes sense. And so we would ask for the opportunity to not just be a bystander, but also have the chance to work with the town and with the regional district the way we did 16 years ago, and have the chance to look at all the alternatives. I would also point out that we had a phenomenal consultant 16 years ago that is still available today and willing to work and has about as much expertise on items such as, for example, disposal of the turf that just came up earlier as any firm might have. And so we would also ask for input into the choice of the consultant, although we understand that the town has raised funds for that purpose. But wanted to also, as my final thought, point out that yes, there are alternatives to rubber crumb, but mostly they are organic and they carry a lot of moisture and they significantly undermine athletic safety. And they're very, very difficult to maintain and need frequent replacement year after year, and also would greatly add to the cost of the project to the point where, to emphasize Wendy's point that we're not sure if 1.5 would do it, but we are 100% committed to help come up with the absolute best solution possible. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
There were some questions, school committee questions.
Oh, there are, okay, sorry.
Yeah.
I want to level set us now because we're kind of running out of time. This was not intended to be a hearing. Okay, we, as the town manager mentioned, we will have a forum where people will be able to give their opinions and their requests and offers for help into the decision-making process. This was intended really to give the town an update on the town manager's thinking and the actions that we're initiating now to get these fields done. So I am going to move now to questions from the school committee, and then I will open it up for maybe one or two questions from the floor, but then I've got to move on. Okay, so.
I'll brief. I won't repeat anything that's been said already. I think I just have one clarification and then a follow-up question. So I think clarification comes again down to the use breakdown, just like I did with the amenities building. The breakdown on usage of Doug White, even though it is on the CCHS campus, and of course the CCHS athletes use that. The hour allocation, because we did have a chance to go through that again in July and again revisit it once the fall sports kicked off. It's really, again, a 70-30. It's 50-50 if you include the 8 to 2 time frame, Monday through Friday. They're not really being used, but we'll take that allocation that brings it closer to 50-50. The reason I bring that up is more on the overall usage. A lot of the youth sports, like you said, Mary, or Carrie, the recreation department with adult athletics happens. The reason I say that is whatever we do, whether it gets dragged out or not, this would be a logistical nightmare if we don't do something soon, whether it's now or 18 months from now. So I guess my question is, what would be sacrificed by accelerating the timeline even to between the fall and spring sports? Because as you may know, the summertime is primarily used by camps. That is a funding source for a number of different programs, and obviously recreation for a number of kids in town and jobs. So waiting and then doing that over a summertime. So what would we be sacrificing? I think to Cam's point, I know we have the study, but can we accelerate this in any way?
Yeah. So I think once we have a designer on board and we can put together a timetable, we can look at that. I mean, I originally was hoping we would be doing something in summer 2025, but there's a small window of time during the summer between the seasons when that could happen. But I don't I don't know, as I stand here today, whether or not we could do that. I guess if I could just say, an alternatives analysis, and I know we've used the word feasibility analysis, and I take responsibility for that because I've been using that term too. We're looking at an alternatives analysis that I would not expect to take. It probably would take less time to put it together than it will for us to talk about it. This is something that they do. You know, these groups are doing this work in communities very much like Concord, with the same questions, concerns, angst about moving forward. So.
And that's exactly my point. Just like what you asked us about Westford, we went and visited Westford. Alexa and Tracy did that. I guess that's what I'm trying to figure out is how do we accelerate this as fast as possible? And I mean, everyone's public. I have committed a lot of my life to sustainability from a professional and volunteer standpoint. I am not looking to it, but if we really wanted to do that as a community, it should have been done 2 or 3 years ago. That timetable is to some degree passing, and I'm looking at this. My kids don't use any of these. I'm literally coming this purely from the school committee. It would be a logistical nightmare if anything dips below this for our athletic director. And I know the same thing for the town, so I want to come into this together. So I think whatever we can do, I know it's 8 or 9 days before Hanukkah and Christmas, but if we can accelerate that in any way possible to see if it's possible for this summer, I would just ask you to consider that.
Certainly. Any other? Go ahead. Go ahead.
Are you ready for me? Is this on? Yeah, so I guess my question sort of intersects with Julie's. I support what Julie said. I think I have a lot of the same sentiments with respect to timing. I was not thrilled to see the word critical in one of the ratings, so that is sort of what is informing me, because to Julie's point, I think those fields are utilized from 2 p.m. to 9 p.m. 5 days a week and pretty much all day on Saturdays and Sundays. So, we are looking at a logistical nightmare. And then I guess my next question is, given that you've mentioned that the feasibility study, or whatever we're going to call it, the alternatives analysis, should be pretty quick and straightforward. I mean, I think, given that Gail sort of does this work all the time, are we talking about anything more than them sort of providing you guys or you with a list of what those materials are and their recommendation? That's sort of part one. Like, is it more complicated than that? Because I'm crossing my fingers that it might not be. And then secondarily, I think originally $100,000 had been allocated to the study, and given that it seems like maybe the scope is reduced to just this alternatives analysis, which again, I'm hoping is just a list in their recommendation, has that dollar amount been adjusted for what you plan to spend?
So the $100,000 really is any alternatives analysis and the design and pulling together the bid specs to put the project out. So we do expect that to be $100,000, probably a little bit more. And I think it's important for us to keep that funding source because, again, the Friends have around 1.5. I think that budget is going to be tight, and if we can use our funds for that design work, that makes it easier to get the project done.
Anything else? Go ahead.
I just have another question / comment. So I did not like the word critical either. And so, there's one thing about turf replacement, but these are children that are on the fields. And correct me if I'm wrong, but about 3,000 to 4,000 children each year are actually playing on those fields. So critical to me seems like we should be doing something right now. And so, in your packet, you said 12 to 18 months it would even take to get the turf. So, I am very concerned about first of all, the fields not being usable, and then what will we do? But also children getting injured on the fields, because we all agree that they're ready to be replaced right now. So I guess, waiting another 18 months for that to happen, we're losing another season where you have 3,000 kids on those fields.
Eric, you have a comment?
We have at least one FinCom question. Don, and then we'll go around.
Yeah, I certainly support that we want to provide adequate, safe facilities for the students, athletes to play in. I want to ask that we include in the analysis one of the guiding principles of environmental economics, which is that we look at the sources of pollution when we are estimating the costs of what we do. So we do it with our eyes open. And at last year's town meeting, Director Cathcart presented a plan for PFAS remediation, and the artificial turf was flagged as a potential source of groundwater contamination. If we are looking at a $1.5 million problem, I want to make sure it's not a $3 or $8 million problem because we have to pull the PFAS back out of drinking water. So just a question of, let's look at everything, all the unintended consequences at the same time, and that we may well conclude that we want to proceed with this, but at least let's do it with our eyes open. Thanks.
Anything else from the FinCom?
I think we're good.
You're all set? All set, good. I'll take one or two comments from the floor.
Janet Rothrock, 618 Nurse Neck Hill Road.
I'm going to limit you to 2 minutes, please.
Yeah. Why are we letting a private group give the town something it does not want? All artificial turf carpets contain PFAS, which allows plastic to be extruded through tiny metal apertures without clogging. Last spring town meeting, we voted to borrow up to $50 million to treat our water in an article entitled Nagog Pond Improvements and PFAS Mitigation. We don't need to add more PFAS to the Hugh Cargill well watershed, which is quite near the high school and already has borderline PFAS levels. Turf carpet blades shed microplastics, and they are concerning as well, and infills contain a variety of harmful chemicals. Pennsylvania currently accepts discarded turf but has no way to process this material. Thousands of rolls of carpet lie in rural areas. In another 15 years, it may be difficult or impossible to dispose of artificial turf if Pennsylvania refuses to increase its burden of PFAS, plastic, and other contaminants. How will the future select board deal with disposal? Can Concord buy liability insurance for future disposal? In 2032, when the lease agreement ends, the town may not want to renew the lease agreement, and CCRSD may not want to take responsibility for disposing of a plastic field either. Further, Carlisle might drive CCRSD reluctance and even sue if pressed to take on the responsibility. I urge the select board to determine the costs, what has been spent so far, what is the life cycle cost once disposal is taken into account, especially 2 or 3 artificial turf disposals. Set up a working group to determine what is right for the town as a whole. Take the time necessary to solve the problem for the good of the town and its future. We have 13 fields. Use some fields more instead of a few fields a lot. And lastly, will we rewrite the agreement so that we don't have to deal with this in the future? If we put in another plastic field, are we going to let a private group be the tail that wags the dog?
Thank you. I want to correct one thing that you said, Ms. Rothrock, is that it's not a select board decision. It's a decision of the town manager, and she's hoping to work with the rec commission to get some input from them.
Tanya Galis.
I'll take one more comment. Tanya, are you for turf or are you for grass?
I am for, I'll be very brief.
Okay.
It's not my call so much, probably grass, but I was just going to ask, Tanya Galis, 62 Prescott Road, I was going to ask, perhaps needlessly, that I hope the Board of Health will be consulted on this too, because I believe a lot of health issues have been discovered and analyzed since 2007 that some of them may put children directly at risk, and that should be also in the forefront. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll take one more comment from someone who is in favor of replacing with turf. We've had one. I'll take one more.
Thanks for the opportunity to speak. My name is Seth Vanderswald, 181 Alcott Road, and I speak tonight, excuse me, as a parent, a coach, and the president of CCYS, our youth soccer organization. Thank you again. I appreciate that we live in a town where we can voice opinions and debate important topics, and we're certainly seeing that spirit in this discussion. It's important to note that no one at CCYS is anti-grass. As a former college athlete, I played on high-quality grass fields, and it can be a wonderful experience. But for grass fields to be high quality, they require constant and costly maintenance, irrigation, and very little usage. But the Doug White fields are probably the most used fields in our town. They host thousands of athletes across multiple sports, well over 1,000 hours every year, and durability is critical. In addition, we live in an area with periods of extensive rain, drought, snow, cold, and more, and the fields must stand up to the weather while remaining available and playable. The health and environmental arguments raised against modern turf fields, when looked at more closely, just don't hold up. The vast majority of our replaced turf fields are recycled, not discarded, and turf companies have committed to products with no PFAS chemicals, while PFAS are already found at low levels in all aspects of our environment. Turf simply doesn't present a meaningful risk in this area. And despite the claims of some, Concord does not have an abundance of available athletic fields. The soccer program itself uses every available field for most available hours, and we're still short. And since we use various grass fields around town, we have first-hand knowledge that they do not stand up to the weather and constant usage. Fields like Emerson, Ripley, Rideout are poor quality, bumpy, and inconsistent, and not appropriate for the level of sports played at Doug White Fields, which includes state championship caliber high school soccer, lacrosse, and field hockey. So on behalf of the Concord Carlisle Youth Soccer Organization, I urge this group to support replacing the existing Doug White turf fields with new modern turf. Thanks so much.
Well done. Thank you. Okay. I'm calling this part of the meeting to a close, and we'll move on to the next agenda item. We will talk more about turf fields, obviously. There'll be forums held. Thank you for coming.
Okay, good evening. Hi, everyone. My name is Megan Zamudo. I'm the Deputy Town Manager. And I'm here to talk about a land use matrix discussion. I know we're a little past time, so I won't take up too much of your time. But so today we're here to talk about Select Board Fiscal Year 25 Goal 12, which is to work with the senior management team to develop a land use matrix and action plan to determine the best matches between municipal needs and potential land available. This is a very large undertaking that impacts the entire community. So I am fortunate to have this tri-board audience this evening to have this initial conversation. So thank you for your time. Next slide, please. Well, I mentioned goal number 12. There are a number of select board goals this year that are related to this project. We have many folks that have been involved in these goals in the room today. We have the MCI Concord goal to engage the community, legislative delegation, and state agencies in a robust planning process that ensures Concord's interests are expressed and prioritized during the disposition of the MCI Concord property. And we have folks from the MCI Advisory Board here this evening. We also have a goal to utilize the expertise of the 2229 Main Street Advisory Task Force and input from the community to determine next steps for that 46-acre parcel at 2229 Main. I mentioned the property matrix, and other goals include evaluating town-owned properties for possible reuse or disposition, increasing tax revenue generation, and protecting and enhancing the diversity of housing stock via continued focus on affordable housing. So here we have, some goals specifically focused on parcels of interest. Okay, next slide, please. So here I wanted to talk a little bit about the plans and guiding documents and resources that we have. I didn't list them all by name because there are many of them, and I was afraid I might forget one or two. But I think it's important to mention that we have a number of guiding documents related to housing, recreation, climate, open space, water and sewer capacity. We have our Envision Concord 2030 master plan. There's a West Concord master plan. And we have analysis and recommendations on some specific parcels, like the 2229 Main Street that is on the agenda a little bit later today. One plan I want to talk about briefly is this Concord Municipal Facilities Assessment and Master Plan. This is the cover sheet here. It's an enormous document, and it had the unfortunate timing of being released in 2020. But this assessment analyzed a significant amount of data to provide direction for short and long-term planning for municipal buildings in Concord. The report is structured in 3 different tiers. There's Scenario A, which recommends minor reconfigurations and repair of existing buildings. Scenario B, which includes recommendations to reconfigure or expand existing buildings on existing sites. And Scenario C is to introduce consolidated facilities, and that outlines site development needed for 6 different sub-scenarios. And that includes some information about current parcels, but also what would be required to build on a new parcel. And it talks about what efficiency could be found to be built on a new site. Next slide, please. This is some photos and a headline from a Bridge article over the summer, or I think in September. There were some takeaways from this analysis that included the failure points in some of our municipal facilities. So both the public safety campus on Walden Street and the Concord Public Works campus located at Keyes Road. And these were highlighted on a tour with the Select Board and the Finance Committee this summer. And so I just wanted to mention that here. The facilities report also provides information about the benefits and efficiencies that could be found in consolidating some town office uses. So we have a number of buildings in Concord where our staff is located all across town. And so the report recommended considering an option where multiple services are under one roof or on one campus. Okay, next slide, please. So through the lens of the Select Board goals and the plans and the studies that I mentioned here, this graphic represents 5 areas of land use needs for the community. So I mentioned the public workspace, public safety space, looking into efficiencies that could be found with consolidated town offices. There's also interest in additional commercial development and interest in housing. Next slide, please. So this slide tries to kind of identify some of the steps here. Right now, we have identified some land use needs. That was the previous slide. Assessing municipal properties, that has been done in this 2020 study in detail. Evaluating private properties, some of this work has been done by, like I said, members of the 2229 Main Street. There were a few different committees. The Oversight Committee is continuing to monitor the cleanup of that site. Then there was a Reuse Committee and now the Advisory Task Force. We also have the MCI Advisory Board who's looking at the redevelopment of the MCI parcel. So that work is ongoing by members of this community. There's also additional parcels that could be of interest that could include further analysis, like an appraisal and some kind of conceptual design efforts. And so now we get into the last piece, which is to match needs with opportunities to optimize land use. Next slide, please. Thank you. And this gets to matching user needs and decision-making criteria. So to do this, we need to be clear about what each program needs and what site constraints exist at the places that we're looking at. So of course, different programs require various criteria. For example, police and fire, we're going to be looking very closely at response time and weighing that appropriately. We're going to be looking at resilience. We need to consider the floodplain, environmental conditions, location, neighborhood impact, etc. So we've had some additional discussions, additional discussions will need to be had with user groups to confirm the critical program criteria and to weigh them appropriately. So that is starting to be laid out at this point. Next slide, please. So the next couple slides that you'll see in a moment are some snapshots from a master spreadsheet that is hard to show, I think, on PowerPoint at meetings like this. But it lays out all of our municipal properties, and I have a few different versions of it that we can look at a high level and start to match the needs and the opportunities. So for example, Public Works right now has about 7 acres at the Keyes Road campus. Our 2020 study recommends 14 acres for that program. So really, we're not going to be investing a lot of time analyzing parcels that don't meet that initial recommended criteria. This spreadsheet also summarizes at a very high level the 2020 facility study findings, but if people are interested in the full context, we can certainly send out a link to that report that's on our website. So you can just kind of go through the next couple, Andrea, and we'll end at next steps. So again, today, this is an update on the Select Board goal and at the beginning of a conversation about how the select board and other members of the community and staff can work together to play some matchmaking with our critical needs and our emerging opportunities. There may be consideration of an appointed working group to work on this project. There needs to be further conversation to outline program-specific decision-making criteria with our user groups. A lot of that has been done in our 2020 study, but with these new properties coming potentially online and available, it's kind of letting us view this in a new light and see which one could actually work or which areas would have neighbor impacts or, kind of natural constraints that would not make it work. What are the deal breakers here? Next, we need to consider how much to weigh various criteria. Of course, response time would be weighed higher than other things, but that's a community conversation about how are we valuing these different elements to come up with a recommendation. And finally, as easy as that, once we have all that together, it's time to analyze the options and provide some recommendations so that some of these items can be included in the 10-year capital plan, specifically the public works and the public safety campus or the new buildings. So that's my presentation for today. I'm happy to answer any questions or take any feedback as time allows.
Thank you, Megan. It's kind of unfortunate that you were preceded by a presentation that had a lot of emotion in the room, whereas I think this is going to impact the town of Concord for a lot longer than the Doug White Fields. So this is really an important thing we're talking about here. This is really looking at all of the pieces of land that are coming available in Concord, all the moving pieces, and how do we fit or how do we match things that are becoming available to the needs that we've identified, and more importantly, what's the criteria we use. So we know we have a group of really good people looking at MCI, but then we've got 2229 Main, and we've got Peabody, and maybe if we move some things there, something else opens up. So this is a complex problem, and we're starting to get our arms around it. And the reason I asked the school committee and the finance committee to be here while we introduce this to the town is because we would really like someone on the school committee to be on our working group so that we can think about what will be the impacts to the schools and what are some town properties that might come in play when we look at some of this domino effect, and also for the finance committee so that you can help us think about how does this impact taxes and any potential revenue sources. So this, again, this is a big deal, okay? And we're just starting to think about it. So I'm going to open it up now to questions and comments, and you're going to hear more and more about this, and like you said, we're going to set up a working group. But I'll open it up now to comments and questions from the select board, and then move to the school committee and the finance committee.
So I'll jump in. If you look at the list of properties, at the bottom are the 2229 Main Street and the MCI Concord properties, which together total just a little under 100 acres of land. And you add the Peabody School property to that, and you get into the 110, 115 acres of land. We never have an opportunity to plan land use like that at a municipal scale in Concord. I would say it's probably been a century since those types of opportunities were there. And we know, we just spent 90 minutes on 2 fields that are about 100 yards long each. And so it would be a real mistake to forego the opportunity to not dig in and try and figure out, are there opportunities to consolidate? Can some of these other properties, which are currently not fit for the purposes that they're being used for today, be used for better and other purposes, like meeting some of these housing goals, like taking the opportunity to spread the opportunity for change from some of the places in town which have experienced a lot of change. I'm talking to you, West Concord, to some of the places that have experienced maybe a little bit less change. I'm talking to you, Concord Center. Those are the opportunities that are represented in this. I think this is a great start that we have this inventory, but until we sort of dive into the inventory and look at the ways that it can solve this problem, and we're talking about large parcels of land which can be subdivided in almost infinite series of ways. So it really is something that we're looking for heads-up kind of engagement around, and we need to get started on it because these pieces of property will come online, some of them very soon, hopefully in February, for the earliest of them, and others within the very foreseeable future on the type of timescales that these projects need to be planned on. So I think it's a great start. Hopefully we'll be talking a lot more about this.
We will.
I have some detailed feedback, but I'll save it for another time.
Thank you. Thank you, Mark. Any other comments? Go ahead.
I'm really happy to see this. Really good job by Megan putting this together. I think this is a really important first step in getting our arms around it, because I've been working with the 2229 Main Street group, and I know there's an MCI group working very hard, the Peabody group needs to be formed, but how are we going to look at them all together?
Yep.
So I'm really interested to hear what the next steps are, or what are some ideas. And I don't know, Mary, if you've been thinking that through, or if that's supposed to be our discussion now of what we're going to, how are we going to proceed now with this working group?
Well, I think what we're going to do is we're going to talk about writing a charge for a working group.
Okay.
And who would be the appropriate, and bring that to the select board. So again, I'm hoping someone from the school committee or the school community, hoping someone from the finance committee, and we've got other ideas. So it's up to us now to put that together and bring it to the select board.
And what kind of time frame do you think, like, the working group should bring back their recommendations, like, even like 12 months, or what do you think?
I think sooner than that,
Yeah,
because
okay.
we need to give input to the MCI group,
Yes.
and likewise, we have to get input from them, but we need to.
Right, and Peabody, we need to, yeah, okay, good,
Yeah.
good. This is wonderful. Thanks for putting it on the agenda. Really happy to see this.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I would just echo, like, the thanks for pulling the information together. I think it's great to see. I would be really curious to understand the facilities that are ranked as sort of red, right, that kind of not meeting the needs. Like, what would be the additional acreage that would be beyond what they're at today? Because that would give us a sense of, like, and I know you can't answer it right this second, but just a sense of, like, hey, so if we did move these things, hey, we're going to have to go from, a 10-acre place to a 15-acre place or whatever it is, right? So you kind of know, like, hey, in total, like, as we're looking at these available land parcels, like, here's what would be kind of ideal, right? And that would give us a sense of the magnitude of what we'd be looking at.
I can for some of them. So for Concord Public Works, they're on 7 acres right now. The plan says they would be looking at 14 to meet their needs with their storage of vehicles and office space that they are, to house their existing operations. I would say for the Walden Street campus, they are at a very small acreage right now. I think I have it in here. But it's pretty tiny, and there's really a significant constraints about that parcel. I think it's just a couple acres, because it's right along the wetlands, and so there's really no room for expansion that was explored. And they would be looking at, I think, about 7 or 8 acres for that campus. And of course, when we're thinking about public safety, there's the West Concord Fire Station. So if the hub is, if the police and fire together is going to be on this side of town, if you're going to keep that West Concord one, those are all kind of part of the conversation, right? Because if you're looking for a home for police and fire on the other side of town, then you'd need to relocate the West Concord base. So, but we do have information for those two. I think it's a little bit less clear for the consolidated town offices. We do have some information. Oh. Can you hear me? Is that okay? Test? Okay. I guess I have some information about those other 2 campuses, and the consolidation of town offices is a little bit less clear, because we do have offices all across town, and so we'd be a little creative about thinking how we could combine those. But we do have, I'd say we're at a good point with this, because we do have a lot of relevant information. So this working group and this effort doesn't have to start from scratch. There's a lot of plans, there's a lot of community input that's been collected, and there's a lot of detailed analysis. And so it's kind of taking those and connecting that to the community values about how to weigh these different elements and make some hard decisions or recommendations anyway.
It's 1.6 acres for the main police station and 1/3 of an acre for the West Concord Fire Station. So we're running our police and fire department on less than 2 acres of land.
So, Megan, the other thing that I saw throughout this was references to recreation. And, you know, there's Beatty Center that's red, and I know Hunt is in need. And so I think about our recreation strategy, and I don't know what our vision is of what we really want in a future state. So is it 2 locations? Is it 1? And I assume that's something that the working group should start to look at based on advice from the town and the rec.
Yeah, I mean, luckily we have the strategic plan that was just done. So I think that will certainly inform conversations. But I mean, when we're thinking about the Peabody School, the combination of both of those parcels together obviously makes it larger, and more possible uses could go there. But I am already getting, you know, letters from the community about the interest in keeping the field. So, you know, to have a conversation about municipal property without recreation would be short-sighted. It's a key element of this community's values, and it has to be at the table.
That's right. Good. Any other comments?
I look forward to it. It's great. I'm glad we're finally getting
We're starting.
To those people in the public, if this sounds like something you want to dig your teeth into, we'd like to hear from you. It's very complicated because it does require the ability to look across extremely disparate program areas and try to make some judgments about what land might be put to potentially vastly different functional uses in service of a larger optimization that we're trying to do.
It'll be a fast-moving, lot of hours task force. Deep dive, fast-moving.
Just a quick comment. So working group sounds great. I guess, how do people get involved? What do you see the timeline being? And is it a volunteer card? Is it, you know, how do people get involved in doing this?
Yes.
And how will you advertise the working group? Because if you're in this room, you know about the working group, but the other
That's a good point.
13,000 people don't know about the working group.
That's a good point. I'll think about that. You're right. We need to publicize it more broadly. You're right. We'll think about that. Anything else? Anything from the FinCom?
Any FinCon question? I'll just say we haven't talked about this as a committee, so I don't want to get ahead of the committee. The FinCom doesn't traditionally take a position or have a role to play on questions of land use or development, but we've been increasingly concerned, increasingly vocal about the need to diversify the tax base to bring in new sources of revenue, given how lopsided it is, relying on the residential property tax. So I think this is a great idea, and I appreciate that the FinCom will have a role.
Thank you. It would be an observer role, because you're restricted, as you pointed out, but it would be an important observer, and we let our observers speak. Great. Okay, I want to thank you for being patient with us and staying here tonight. This is longer than I expected. I appreciate your patience. I appreciate your feedback, and keep up the good work.
So we're about, I guess we'll give the FinCom and the school committee an opportunity to adjourn their meetings if they're ready. And then we'll move into the rest of the select board meeting. So let's call it 2 minutes for that process. School committee?
Can I have a motion to adjourn the regional school committee?
I move to adjourn the Concord Carlisle Regional School Committee.
Okay, we will do a roll call.
You look like
Morano.
Oh.
Cynthia, are you online? Can you roll call out?
Yeah, we'll be quick though.
Good.
Okay.
We can just go.
She's trying.
Okay.
Or even just wave if you want to wave. You can just wave.
Yeah, I'll wave.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah, I know. Sorry.
Good.
A little tight here.
Give it the...
It's fine. Can you send me your name, please?
Thank you.
So somebody's got a pile of
So anyway, good. And she does remember this practice. That's all to be good. Like when I I just thought, oh my gosh, how? And I so okay. All right.
Oh, you should see my spreadsheet. So this is like, I mean, it's like you're gonna have a different rating for each. It's like I can't show
When you
this
go to
on-
create scenarios, you're going to have to do some sort of artificial intelligence to say, how do I optimize?
Definitely. No, I mean, I'm using that.
You can almost tell.
Thank you. We'll probably share. Do you have another speaking role? Yes.
Very, thank you both. It's really excellent. I didn't have a chance because it was quiet, but the socioeconomic diversity, well, that's a big interest for us, so thank you.
We're going to start our meeting in just a moment. If you have a conversation that you need to have it outside, please. Your name tag makes a great gavel.
Okay. First order of business, public comment. Public comment's limited to 3 minutes each, and it's, what? Ready? Okay, is there any public comment on something that is not on the agenda? Okay, seeing none. Any online?
Let's take a look online. Nope. Okay.
Okay, moving on to the consent agenda. Are there any items on the consent agenda that a select board member would like to remove and discuss?
All set.
Okay, move to approve the consent agenda as published with thanks to the Concord Free Public Library Corporation for a gift in the amount of $30,000, the Shelberbrook School for a gift to the Concord 250 gift account, and Elizabeth Wilczek for a gift to the Concord 250 account.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Very good. Select board nominations.
Select board, sorry, got my motions. Move to nominate Justin Huff of 76 Pine Street to the Public Ceremonies and Celebrations Committee for a term to expire May 31, 2027.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Very good. Moving on to the town manager's report.
So in the interest of time, I will let the written report that's in the agenda packet stand, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. The chair's report, I have a few. I'll talk fast. The first thing is that on January 6th, we are going to hear an appeal about a tree at 183 Hubbard Street, a home that is recently renovated on the corner of Hubbard Street and Thoreau. And I would ask the select board members to please drive by there so you get a visual for what we're going to be talking about.
What was the address again?
It's 183 Hubbard. It's right at the corner of Hubbard and Thoreau.
Okay.
Second thing I'd like to mention is there's a chair's breakfast this Wednesday morning, December 18th. It's going to be bistro style. If you can make it, I would really appreciate seeing you there. We are going to have, some people have asked about a charge for the tax relief task force. We're expecting, Wendy, I think I've asked Wendy
Yeah, I'm working on it.
to put something together. We'll have some draft on January 6th.
Sure.
And finally, I wanted to mention that Minuteman Media Network was awarded a first prize for from the Alliance for Community Media, and we really appreciate that. We think they do a great job. We couldn't do it without them. So here to Minuteman Media Network. Next item on the agenda is to discuss the Select Board correspondence policy. If you remember, we developed a correspondence policy in July or June of this year, and we did it for two reasons. We wanted to be transparent about what our criteria was, and we wanted to engender civil discourse. So we had a good intention. What I found out later, and I let you all know, is that we might have run afoul of some First Amendment rights. So we had training on First Amendment rights. I think we need to rewrite our correspondence policy. I'm going to work with legal counsel to do so, and in the meantime, I would recommend that we have a moratorium on posting correspondence to the Select Board website. Any discussion?
Mary, when would you expect to have a revised policy?
I'd probably say March. I could commit to March,
Okay.
because we're busy right now.
Yeah.
So just really quickly, Mary, I was at that training.
Yep.
And I'm trying to remember now, and I don't know if you want to say or
Yep.
talk offline, but why would maybe be a violation?
There were three, it's in the here we are, the exceptions. So we say we're going to publish correspondence on our policy, except if it meets these
Yeah, yeah,
exceptions.
yeah.
And some of those exceptions are problematic.
Oh.
So that's where we need to focus. We need to either eliminate them or tighten them up.
Okay.
So sorry, are we better than to suspend all publication? Is that?
No, we're saying that we will certainly accept correspondence, right? We'll read correspondence, and it's
Right.
public record, so anybody could request it. What I'm saying is that we won't post it to the Select Board website.
Until we have the policy updated?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, so I'm just trying to understand, like, it's better for us not to post anything than to
Yes.
keep.
Yes.
Than to be selective in the way that we've been selective
Okay.
in the past.
Okay, got it.
Right. So, actually, some people, when they send letters to the Select Board, don't want them posted. They want them read by the Select Board, and we don't always know that until we've already posted it. So that's problematic. And there are other ways for people to get themselves heard, either through public comment at the beginning of our meetings. We're lucky we have the bridge. So there are many other ways that people can address the entire town, which might be a consideration for, do we even want to post any correspondence?
Right.
But that's not the conversation, right? Should we simply have correspondence come to the Select Board and we read them and we consider what we're hearing? We're under no obligation to post. In fact, sometimes posting has unintended consequences. So this is a conversation I think we need to have. But in the meantime, because I haven't had the time to work with legal counsel, I would like to propose a moratorium.
So Mary, I just had one other thought. One of the things the school committee does is they don't publish them, but they say what they got and what the topics were. So while we have a moratorium, maybe
okay.
that's one thing that we could just quickly summarize.
Okay, then that's good. That's a good option for when we bring it back to the agenda. Good, thank you, Wendy. Okay, do I have a motion?
Move that we enact a moratorium on posting letters to the Select Board website.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. Yeah. Well, very good.
Probably should have taken that before we voted, but. okay.
Yeah.
I know you've already voted, but just going to, for the record.
Go ahead.
Diane Proctor, 57 Sudbury Road. I think personally that those letters are very important for citizens to be able to read, to the degree that they're not defamatory or in any way injurious to the person who receives them. In part because I think it's a way of the broader community and knowing what others are thinking. And so I think that really helps. So I would encourage you as you go forward and formulate a final policy to take into consideration the value of having those available and not just summarized.
Thank you, Diane. Mr.
Michael Williams, 1284 Sudbury Road. Thank you, Madam Chair. I think it's really important to have the greater potential for transparency. The point of having the correspondences posted and the sort of tricky position that the board itself would be in vis-a-vis the presentation that there was in both First Amendment and open meeting law. I know it's something tricky to thread, but I think as you look at this in your conversation, please look toward greater transparency so that the community hears what the questions that don't get into the bridge, that don't get up to public comment, understands the import of that and has a way to see them, understand the encumbrances that you're under the First Amendment and open meeting law. But please try to err, if possible, toward greater transparency. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we will have more discussion about this when I bring it back in March. Okay, next item on our agenda is the liaison reports. Do any of us have any questions for any of the others around our liaison reports?
I don't have one on a liaison report, but I do have one that relates to a liaison committee. I just want to comment that the League of Women Voters on their first Friday had a forum on the MCI task force looking at town committee, and it was a great presentation, and there was great discussion in the audience. And if anyone's interested in what's happening with the town study committee, they should watch that. I'm sure it'll be posted shortly. So it was a good conversation. I know. It's the town study committee. Yeah, it was. Yeah, I did say. Yeah,
great.
That MCI was a different one.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah.
That was good too.
It was.
Good. Thank you, Wendy. Anything else that we want to say or ask or clarify about liaison reports?
Are we going to keep doing them this way, or we don't know yet?
I think so.
Okay.
I'm okay with that. What do you think?
Sure.
Until we get to agendas that we get plenty of time. But
okay.
Let's see that happening. Okay, great. The next item, are we catching up with time, is the review and discuss the 2229 advisory. And that's Mr. Bone.
Oh, good.
Oh, the books. Yay.
Christmas
I actually was waiting for it. Oh, no.
Oh, nice. Christmas presents. Wow.
Oh, that's great.
Some light reading, huh?
Thank you.
Okay. Wow, look at that. All right.
Okay. This beautiful gift wrap, Paul.
Did you sign the property?
Are these,
Can I get an autograph?
That's right. That's a great.
all right.
That's great.
Oh, it is chewy.
It is. Thank goodness.
Okay.
So, Paul Bohm, 11 Ridgewood Road, Chair of the 2229 Advisory Task Force, and as promised, delivering the report to you, the task force report. I probably should have said ho, ho, ho as I brought up the bag. So a lot of work. Very proud of the report. What you have in front of you is two volumes. First one is the main report, and then you have the appendices. We separated those. I don't expect you to open it right now or read it right now. We have had several briefings and discussions on the report. I think when we last spoke on October 31st, I think Mark said, you guys should read the report, and then sometime after the year, we'll get together, we'll have a briefing on it. So I think you need to read the details. You do know our overall recommendation, which is, I'll call it a conditional recommendation. Proceed towards acquiring the property down that pathway, which involves negotiations with EPA and DOJ. It involves planning, a lot of things we talked about tonight. In the context of what we discussed before, in terms of how do we use these properties, I think there's a lot of opportunity. We've talked about the needs, the municipal needs, but I think on the opportunity side, and our report covers that, affordable housing, commercial development, recreation, It's a lot of acreage that's available. That probably goes beyond the needs of DPW and fire. I think the total property acreage would probably accommodate that. But so our report, I think, talked about opportunity as well as specific needs of the town. I don't think there's anything more to say tonight. I think we should probably schedule something next year and have a fuller briefing. Whether you want that briefing to be a public hearing, that combines a public hearing with the Q&A session, which might be advisable, because we do want to brief the public on the report. This report is online. It was online, I think, last Friday, so everything here in detail is available. There's a lot of information there, but you sort of know the bottom line. The report contains all of the elements: legal, health risk, ownership issues for the town, reuse issues. Also, we have two major pieces of recommendation. One is how to manage the property, the institutional controls, how to maintain the remediation systems there, and also a risk communication plan, how to continue to engage the public as you move down the pathway. This property is not going to be available for development until 2029. The cleanup is well underway. EPA will be able to turn it over formally to the next owner with an assurance that the cleanup has met goals. And so I mean, part of the concern that a lot of people have had, well, will EPA and will the responsible parties deliver? I think my answer, the Oversight Committee's answer, by virtue of all the tours of the site, I think we have a lot of confidence. But at the end of the day, it's going to be EPA saying through a legal agreement that we've cleaned up the site. So this is all pointing to a legal settlement agreement with the town that captures all of the financial and risk, all the issues. And at that point, the actual decision to acquire or not can be made on real information. We can't have all that detailed information in this report because there's a lot that's not known. A lot that town council have to negotiate. So we did the best we could. There's a section there on decision criteria, how we made the decision. I think you should look at that. It's pretty important because we sat down. We have to be able to know enough about a lot of areas to make a recommendation. We felt that we checked all the boxes. Yeah, that's sort of the report. For now, you have it in your hands, and we can schedule the next steps.
Okay, knowing that the next step for us is to read it, and we're going to come back and revisit it, do we have any questions at this time for Paul?
No, outside of just a big thank you to you and the whole committee,
Really?
because it's an enormous amount of work, and I did see it online. I started a sneak peek, so it looks like a great report, so thank you for all your efforts.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, fine.
Real quick, just you mentioned 2029. Is that when redevelopment would start? Like you could break ground to start redevelopment? Is that the concept?
Well, if the planning is perfect and all the designs are made and the decision is made, we're going to acquire the site if EPA gives us these documents and settlement negotiations are done. We could theoretically break ground in 2030. That requires everything to move forward and for us to be ready.
Great.
For us to be ready, I think, is important. So how we get ready, that one of the tables, table 14 in there is a whole series of steps.
We'll go in.
You and
thank you.
Other committees, how to get ready.
Yep.
And so I think the answer is yes, we could break ground in 2030 if we're really serious about this.
And just real quick headline, is there any land use that you're recommending we don't use that property for? Like, given the environmental issues, is there anything that you'd say, hey, that's off the table? Like, the committee's recommending we not do this type of land use, or is it anything is still open possibility?
There's nothing that's off the table.
Okay.
There are areas of the site that we won't be able to do certain things. But those are few and far between. We'll know a lot more detail when EPA gives us the final documents on the institutional controls. We'll have maps exactly which areas, if any, are off limits. Remember, that half of the site is conservation, it's bog. We can connect it to trails, and then half, 20 to 25 acres, is developable. But to answer your question, Cameron, I think there's nothing that we found that's off the table from residential through through commercial.
Thank you.
So my question was going to be, I know this has been in draft for a while, and that the task force has presented it at public forums and answered a lot of questions about what's in this report. At this stage of the game, though, if there are members of the public who also read the report alongside of us and have comments, is there any future forum scheduled at the moment that people could come and ask their questions of you, and how would you recommend we might consolidate comments on this particular report specifically that might inform us?
Good question. So we have no meetings planned, right? Nothing on the calendar, but we are in business until May of next year. There is a specific website. There's an email address on the site. Those emails will go to the chair. And so, if people have questions, it's easily found. They could tee those up. And if we get enough questions, I'll reconvene and we can have a task force meeting. Or maybe those questions can wait till we have the joint hearing.
Yeah, what I'm thinking, Mark, is when in February, after we've had a chance to read this report, and we get together and we have a forum at the same time that we also discuss amongst ourselves if we want to write a letter to the EPA and DOJ, because we're not committing to taking acquisition, so it's not as if the forum would be too late to inform our decision. Right. All we're doing is we're writing a letter to them saying, we would like to continue to negotiate.
Yeah.
So I think we can do the forum and the discussion with the select board as far as writing that letter to express an interest to move forward at the same night.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's the final point, when to write that letter. Clearly, I think you had a discussion last time, read the report first.
Right.
But if you decide in January to proceed and get a head start on that, the only thing that says is that EPA and DOJ were potentially interested in acquiring the site, and we'd like to start talking to you and get town council involved. So, and I asked about the sort of format of that letter. It's pretty informal. You could write a letter, and I can give you the addresses of the two attorneys at DOJ and EPA. We'll send that to you.
Please.
The letter would be sent to them, or an email could be sent to them. They don't need a lot to say, okay, they're interested, let's schedule something. And that's something that'll probably be in the first quarter.
Okay, we can do that. Great. Thank you. I really appreciated the action and milestone section of your report. I like having things laid out as far as what we need to do, so thank you for that. Thank you very much.
Okay. No motion on that one?
Nope. Okay, next thing is to discuss the a 15-minute parking space at Thoreau Depot.
Hello, I'm Mimi Graney. I'm the Economic Vitality Manager for the town. The businesses in Thoreau Depot reached out to me to see if they could have a 15-minute parking space. I met with Public Works. Basically, it's 3 businesses that are in one block. It's Concord Provisions, the pizza place, and the dry cleaner, all of which have got kind of fast turnaround customers, but all the parking spaces allow for many hours for people to park there. So they asked for one parking space kind of in the middle of the block. Meeting with Public Works, we identified an ideal spot that was easy to get in and out, equidistant from all the businesses, and easy to put a sign up. So that was the one that's identified in the packet submitted to you.
Andrea, could you just zoom in on the picture? I think that'll be most helpful for most people.
So you can see it's marked in pink there. It's basically right in front of the pizza place. They've got a couple parking spaces, their own private parking lot.
Very good. Thank you, that's better. So it's basically right across from Bedford Farms.
Yep. Yep.
Okay.
Any questions, comments from
No, I think it's a great idea.
I'm with me. Yep.
That's all right. Which one? Oh, that.
Yeah.
Kind of colorblind.
Oh. It's a small rectangle.
Questions, comments? Cameron?
So, no, it's not a new spot, right? It's just taking an existing spot.
It's an existing
and
spot
marking
that
it.
used to have a meter on
Yeah,
it.
so that it's fast.
Designating
fast in
it
and
for
out.
15-minute only. There you go.
Gotcha.
So, right, kind of, yeah.
Ready for a motion?
Okay, move to approve the 15-minute parking space at Thoreau Depot as presented.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Very good, thank you, Mimi. And you're up next for the decals.
Yes, the West Concord Junction Cultural District has been working on this for a while. This is modeled on a program that's been in several other communities, most notably Winchester. So these are decals that are intended for outdoor applications on like sidewalks. It could be on concrete or brick. And they are proposing a set of 130 of them. You can see in your packet, it's basically a loop on either side of Commonwealth Avenue, roughly from opposite the Junction Park there by Club Car Cafe, down as far as kind of opposite Neshoba, that little park there on either side of the street.
Kenny Dunn Square?
Sorry?
Is that Kenny Dunn Square?
I don't know my square name.
Okay, okay.
I think it's where it becomes Lawsbrook.
It goes down to the flower shop.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
So they did a mock-up. So they did one test decal just to make sure it's easy to put down and come up, that it didn't cause any slipping or peeling or anything. They used that one as the one that's advertising the poetry phone. They did that earlier this spring. It's been doing great. And we wanted to leave it down just to show it to you all, and then we'll take it up now that winter's coming. They also did another mock-up. They did it in construction paper, the actual size, and laid it out on the ground and showed it to various business owners to kind of see, like, is that too many, not enough? And thought that the placement was appropriate. And they negotiated with the printing company, so got the price down dramatically. So the budget now is just about $5,000. They think about half of that is printing of the decals, the other half is for the installation, which sounded like a lot. But when we started doing the math and realized, okay, you got to sweep the ground, you got to deal with pedestrians, you got to put it down square, seal it down, take all the bubbles out. We worked out that's about 10 minutes each, 7 hours a day. It's about almost a 3-day job. And we need to work with a contractor that's skilled in terms of doing installation. So we found a flooring contractor to do the job. So the group is wanting to now do a call for art, and they're focusing on specifically on kids art and celebrating the 250th. And hoping to get approval. So far, the select board just approved the one decal, and it's spoken a little bit about the budget, so I think they've answered a lot of the questions and asking permission to move forward. If possible, and I anticipate your schedule might be pretty busy around the 250th, if we might be able to go for a consent agenda once they have the actual individual designs worked out. There is a committee that's going to be approving all of those.
Questions?
No, I just want to comment. I think it's a fantastic project, and I love that you engaged all the kids, K through 12, as well as adults are in there as well. The other thing, one question I had, I saw the original art size is bigger than the decal. That was deliberate?
So the decals are going to be either 18 to 22 or 18 to 24. We've been going back and forth trying to play with the budget. The artwork will all be submitted digitally, so we're putting it out to the artists to let them know it needs to be reproducible, that size, and make sure they've got the right ratio for the artwork. So the team's working with teachers in particular to help make that more consistent.
Yeah, one of the attachments just had a different size, so I wasn't sure if that was deliberate or not, but I'm sure it probably was.
Yeah, we kept going back and forth about the size.
All right, so check attachment B then. But I think it's great.
I think this is a very creative project. It's going to be beautiful. And there's one issue that I do see in the scheduling, and maybe you've already figured it out, but it says that in April is when the decals will be placed on the sidewalks. And I do have some concerns about that, just knowing how busy the town is going to be in April, how many traffic issues and, everything going on here. Whether maybe that could be moved to March or May, or are you going to do it the first week of April? Or because I just, we're going to have so many tourists here, and staff is going to be extremely busy. Even if DPW doesn't have to do it, they probably have to go out and supervise it, or the police detail. I just don't see how we're going to do it in April.
So the installation is pretty low impact. It's literally just one guy with a broom and sticking it down. And it's on a sidewalk. If anything, West Concord is worried that they're not going to get enough attention.
Right.
It is going to be a little dependent on the weather too. We don't want to have any snow. We don't want to have
Right.
any, and we have periodically had snow April 1st. So we want to kind of hedge that. So.
Right, I know. I just don't, I think April will be very tough. I really do. But if you can do it, great.
Anything else?
No.
Good. Do you have a motion?
I do have a motion. Move to approve the West Concord Cultural Center site for an estimated 130 decals.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Okay.
All right.
Next up is the Concord 250.
And we're
With a-
officially 2 minutes ahead of schedule.
With a
What?
So we
How
can,
did that happen?
we can slow down, with a focus on
No,
public
wait,
safety.
this must be 8:05, right?
No, no.
8:25. Oh, that's, okay.
No, we're still behind.
I skipped over one.
Can we do that?
Oh, we just said we had 2 minutes to do this.
Yeah, so one minute do like this, or do you want to use the other?
The land is,
Good evening.
Good evening.
Long time no see.
Yeah, that's that time of the month again. We're happy to be back before the Select Board. My name's Gary Clayton, 31 Black Birch Lane. I am co-chair of the Concord 250 Executive Committee. I'll mention this evening a number of my committee compatriots are here as well, including Rob Monroe, who's co-chair of the Executive Committee, and then there are a number of other subcommittee chairs here as well. You might just, and committee members, you might just raise your hand just to get a feel for how many. Terry, you can raise your hand too. Terry, you can raise your hand too. So, I want to make sure you're.
I don't do anything, you guys do all.
That's not true. That's not true. So we are here this evening to speak specifically about public safety as it relates to our preparations for celebrations and activities regarding Concord 250. I am going to turn it over to Concord Chief of Police Tom Mulcahy in just a moment. I want to flag a couple of things for you. You've all found at your table or chair a flyer relative to April 19th, 2025, the timeline, some of the key times and activities associated with the events that will unfold on that day, a bright sunny day. That's what the forecast says. Always, all weekend. And there is a map of the parade route on the back side of this flyer. This is a parade route that is longer and more expanded than is typically the case on Patriots' Day. We are also very much involved in continuing to develop, working with various partners throughout the community, both public and private, on a variety of programs. I think we have now roughly 50 programs scheduled. Some have actually already transpired. But in that spirit, I just want to flag for you this coming Saturday, December 21st, 4 p.m. at the Wright Tavern. There will be an award ceremony regarding our Concord 250 essay contest. And this was a competition that was made available for all high school students within the town of Concord. So we'll be announcing the award winners on Saturday. So we'll keep you apprised of more programs and events as they unfold. But it's there's a lot happening and a lot more will happen. Again, this evening, we want to focus specifically on public safety, and we have been doing a great deal of work. I'm going to turn it over to Chief Mulcahy in a second. I want to acknowledge and thank the town staff, particularly within the police department, the fire department, public works, public health. So when we talk about public safety, it's all of those resources being brought to bear. And of course, the staff here in the townhouse as well are a critical part of that. Very much a team effort. So let me turn it over to Chief Chief Mulcahy.
Thank you, Gary. Good evening, everyone. I'm Tom Mulcahy. I'm the police chief. Madam Chair, members of the board, thank you for the opportunity to have us in front of you tonight to speak about the public safety plans for the 250th celebration in April of next year. As Gary mentioned, I'm here with some of our public safety team. We're happy to deliver a brief presentation as quickly as we can get through this and answer any questions you may have for us. Get to the next slide, please. So on April 19th, as Gary mentioned, if I could, public safety, we talk about public safety, we talk fire, police, EMS, but with that, additionally, public health, public works, all of our assets here in the municipal government that'll be on hand to help us with the event. They've been a fantastic, everyone's pulling in the same direction to get this done. So there'll be a regional celebrations impact on 4 host communities next April. And the Arlington, beginning with Arlington, Lexington, Lincoln National Park, as well as Concord. So there's been, it's required significant ongoing, monthly, now down to about weekly and almost daily public safety planning with our federal, state, county, municipal public safety partners with planning and meetings and resources. So to note, there will be federal and state resources already going to be deployed to the Boston Marathon. So we're competing for that, for those resources. So the scope and the complexity of our planning cannot be overstated. For about a year and a half now, numerous meetings have been held with our public safety partners from each of the Battle Road communities. Again, Arlington, Lexington, Lincoln National Park, as well as here in town. We've been meeting with our state and federal partners, our local partners. We've been working with our partners at MEMA, the Mass Emergency Management Agency. So MEMA is very familiar with these large-scale events. They put on the Boston Marathon every year, as well as the Boston Pop. So we're working hand in hand with them. They've created, they are subject matter experts, and they've created working groups, about 10 of them, with subject matter experts assigned to each from all of our assets. So we're developing a fiscally responsible public safety plan. We're taking a real measured approach to respond to our known challenges and the risks that we anticipate through our intelligence gathering. Our plan is a scalable plan, depending on real-time intelligence, and it'll be scaled either up or down depending on what intelligence we have and then what crowd size we end up having. So we're anticipating, our planning assumptions, we're anticipating at least 100,000 spectators, more along the lines of 150 to possibly 175,000 spectators, as well as participants in the parade. The venues are going to be open to the public and very challenging to secure. In 1975, there were 120,000 in the crowd, so we're anticipating that. And the VIPs, we have dignitaries and VIPs that have been invited to participate in these events for each of the communities, including the Office of the President of the United States, Mass Congressional Delegation, the Mass Governor, the Royal Family has been invited. So we anticipate media coverage, national as well as international. So we're planning for the potential for protesters and counter-protesters, and we have teams readily trained for that if there are any disruptions. The National Park Service estimated that in 1975 there were about 12,000 protesters from the People's Bicentennial Commission and demonstrating. So we're planning on some protesters. Traffic and crowd control measures are going to begin on Friday night, April 18th at about 6 o'clock. And if we could get to the next slide, please. I'm going to go over the major event schedule. On Friday night at 7 o'clock, the 18th, there's an event honoring the Congressional Medal of Honor recipients. We'll have security on hand for that, but on a much smaller scale. Obviously, we'll have security, not compared to what we're going to have for the major event on Saturday. So our operational plan will be in effect in the early morning hours of Saturday. At 6 o'clock, we've got a dawn salute. At 8:30, the parade will step off. At 9:30, we anticipate being into the old North Bridge, and there'll be a ceremony at the North Bridge. 10 o'clock, there's a tentative military flyover. And then the timing of the end of parade is estimated, it may go later into the afternoon, but we're estimating that the parade concludes about 1:30, something like that. Monument Square will be secured throughout the parade, as well as after the parade for the family events and the community activities that are going to be in the square at about 2 o'clock. We're going to keep the square closed for the duration, including during the drone show, which will be at dusk. And, following the drone show, while we mobilize, we're going to need time to demobilize. So this is going to commence with Public Works and their final cleanup of the parade route, breaking down of the barricades and the detours, and the removal of all the equipment from the area to make it passable for traffic. So we're hoping to get the square open by midnight. And I want to really emphasize that there will be no interruptions to service on Sunday for any of the faith institutions. We're aware it's Easter weekend, and there will be no interruptions to that at all. Next slide, please. The parade route. I'll jump to, excuse me. We've submitted our events to the Department of Homeland Security, Special Event Assessment Rating, and they use a risk-based methodology to determine an event's special event assessment rating. Concord's came in at a level 3 determination, and a level 3 indicates that the event is of national international importance, but it's going to provide limited federal support to us. So the majority of this is going to be, we'll be primarily responsible for managing the event at the local and state levels. For past 3 level SEER events, the federal assistance has included explosive canine teams, cyber risk assessments, venue screening, field intelligence teams, air security, and tactical operations support. To give you a few examples of a level 3 determination that you'll be aware of would be the Indy 500, the Kentucky Derby, and the Super Bowl. So given our 250th scale and impact, we expect extensive crowds and national and international media coverage. So it's going to be quite an event on Saturday. Next slide, please. So I think we're missing a slide, and I do want to just go over the parade route with everyone quickly. Oh, we have it. All right, excellent. So the parade route, obviously the major change this year, the only significant change is going to be a little bit of a larger parade and a longer parade, given the significance of the celebration. So the change this year is that the staging area is moved from Stowe Street down to Thoreau Street at the entrance to the high school. So the parade, there's going to be 2 perimeters set up to control traffic. There's be an outer perimeter, which will be on the Route 2 corridor, and that's going to be from Crosby's Corner right down to the rotary at Barrett's Mill Road. Those are going to be soft closures where we will have staff, state police, Concord police officers, traffic officers manning those barricades. And what I mean by soft is there'll be barricades to block the flow of traffic. And these perimeters are designed for the safety and smooth flow of our parade. So the outer perimeter, as I mentioned, will be the whole length of Route 2. All the roadways coming off of Route 2 will be blocked. And then the inner perimeter will be blocked with hard barricades. So the inner perimeter is going to be completely around the parade route. And the inner perimeter will be blocked with commercial vehicles from Public Works to prevent any motor vehicles from traveling into the parade route where participants and spectators are. So I'd like to just go over quickly the parade. It's going to begin and stage at the high school on Thoreau Street. It'll proceed down Thoreau Street to Sudbury Road. It'll turn right onto Main Street, continue on into Monument Square. It'll proceed northbound out on Lowell Road. We'll go right on Liberty Street. It'll turn right into Historic National Park. Depending on the water levels, if we get flooding there, we'll need to continue on Liberty Street and continue on to Monument and hold the ceremony down there. If not, we'll go right into the entrance to the National Park and continue the ceremonies there. When we get through the ceremony, we'll proceed to Monument Street outbound, inbound into the square, and we'll go by the review stand, and there'll be a ceremony there. From there, the parade will proceed out Lexington Road to Haywood Street, and then it'll turn right onto Haywood and end on Everett Street at Emerson Field. Next slide, please. So we'll be running a incident command structure for the parade itself on Saturday. It'll be for, we run incident command to manage large-scale events. The structure, it helps different agencies work together effectively for these events. So we're going to be running it as a unified coordination center. The unified coordination center is going to be located out of town. The representatives from law enforcement, fire, EMS, public works, public information, and other agencies will collaborate there on all decision-making and communication. And the UCC coordinates real-time responses, manages resources and assets, and maintains situational awareness. As well as the UCC, we'll be standing up our EOC in town here, and that'll be at the Public Safety Building on 219 Walden Street, and that'll be staffed with our staff here from the town. Aside from the Concord-specific planning, intermunicipal and National Park Service, regional planning is ongoing. It continues. Each of the Battle Road communities that I've mentioned and are listed up here in this slide have their own event action plan, and we continue to work with one another on these plans. Any of the resources and assets that will be deployed to any incident that takes place or is needed in any of those communities will deploy centrally from the UCC as needed. We've been working continuously with our partners at National Park on this plan. I just want to thank Chief Ranger Randy Biddle and Superintendent Simone Monteleone for their partnership in this planning as well. Next slide, please. So moving forward, we're going to really ramp up the communication messages to the community as well as the public. First off, I'd like to thank Diane Proctor and her team, Polly Meyer and Laurie Stefanoff for leading the 250th Concord marketing plan. So they're working to develop with us a comprehensive communication plan to ensure that everyone's well informed regarding the logistics and the public safety involved with the 250th parade. The plan includes utilizing various platforms such as concordma.gov, concord250.org, Mass 250, America 250, social media outlets, newsletters, and more. The key messages here cover essential details like the list of the 19th events, the parade logistics, any transportation and parking information that we're going to have out there. Where major road closures will be in effect, as I've mentioned, at 6 o'clock Friday night, so we want to get the message out to the community to plan accordingly for that. Obviously, we're going to have people on scene to facilitate the movement of traffic for residents, business owners within on Friday evening, but we're going to put hard closures in place overnight, Friday into Saturday. So we're really promoting the use of public transit. We're working with the MBTA to increase commuter rail service, buses and trains, and we're increasing the commuter rail service beginning at 5 o'clock on April 19th, 5 a.m. There's going to be designated spectator satellite parking, which will be available in town at the Middlesex School, Virginia Road, MCI Concord, Verrill Farm, and Baker Avenue. And under the law enforcement working group, there is a transportation subcommittee that has been working with Concord Transportation. We've secured 25 to 30 buses with John Arena to transport spectators and residents to and from these events in town. So there will be credentialed parking, which we'll be working on in the next few months. Credential parking is going to be available to town staff, local business staff, and mobility impaired persons. Additionally, our ongoing communication efforts are going to include unique messaging tailored to residents, visitors, businesses, institutions of faith in town here, and our local schools to ensure that everyone knows the impact of the planned events. And we've also assigned police officers to act as liaisons to the business community and the faith institutions. We'll be hosting continuous meetings moving forward to hear their concerns and then bring them back to the leadership of the public safety planning. So if we could go back to just two slides back. Excuse me, one slide back. One slide. I apologize. There you go, right there. One thing I neglected to talk about is the regional public safety working groups, and I just want to go through these quickly. These are the MEMA working groups that we've put together. So there's intelligence and investigations, public safety communications, hazardous weather, sheltering and family reunification, law enforcement operations, EOD, explosive ordnance disposal and suburban, emergency medical services, and mass casualty. Public information as well as emergency alerting, and then the Unified Coordination Center and tactical operations. So I threw a lot of information out there. It's kind of, but I wanted to give you as much as I could in a quick, short period of time here. We're open. The team is here. Anyone has any questions for us, I'll be happy to answer them for you. So thank you for your support.
Thank you, Chief Mulcahy. Any questions from the board? Wendy?
It's a very comprehensive report, so it's a lot to take in.
Yeah.
I guess part of my question, and there's a little barcode down here on one of these slides. I don't know if that goes to messaging that's on here.
So moving forward, that is going to be a QR code that we're going to be able to load up with information regarding all the logistics for the parade and the events, the times of the events, the road closure times, the satellite parking. People will be able to utilize that.
Excellent. That's exactly what I was hoping you were going to say, so that's great. And then I guess, so I heard you say you have a working group with the local business community.
Yeah,
Speak a
we've
little bit to
addressed,
that.
excuse me.
Can you just speak a little bit to what?
Sure,
what's
we've
happening?
addressed the Rotary Club and some of the other business community. I know some of the team had addressed this group back in June, but we're going to continue. We've put liaisons together, and we're going to start meeting more regularly with the business community as well as the faith groups in town from here until April.
Yeah, I just assume they have a lot of questions, so great
Yes.
that you've started that
And,
process.
and Fred and I did meet with the Concord Business Partnership about a week and a half ago, and we'll be following up, working with the Chamber of Commerce for another meeting with the business representatives in January. And we have a date set for that already.
Great. It's getting busy, getting busy. Very good. Go ahead.
Terry, do you have any questions?
Just so much work, so we're so appreciative. I've been at the meeting, so
you
pass it on. Yeah.
Mark?
Just, has the schedule of events with the other communities sort of been coordinated already, and are they sort of at a similar level of communications at this stage of the game?
There has been intermunicipal coordination, Mark, with the other communities, and yes, their events piggyback and some overlap, so we have taken all of that into account, yeah.
Great. So would that QR code lead one to, if somebody's planning their weekend or something like that? I know everything, the best events are here in Concord, of course, but.
I would ask Diane to speak to that.
Thank you for a terrific report, Tom, and Gary, and Rob, and Fred. This is falling apart. Let's see. Diane Proctor, 57 Sudbury Road. There will be, on that QR code, it will take you to the website, and the website will give you all the information and all the events that are taking place as the calendar becomes increasingly populated and as information becomes more specific. And we're working closely with the tourist bureau here in town to make certain that we can use that website to the greatest advantage for informing people. And the bridge is here tonight. Thank you, Dakota. The bridge will be providing much information to citizens around town in collaboration with the Communications Committee. So there will be many ways in which the citizens of Concord will be broadly and well informed.
Thank you.
Hi, Polly Meyer, 63 Indian Pipe Lane. Also with the events, we are sharing this all with Mass 250. Anytime that we have events that are open to people outside of Concord, I'm loading those into the Mass 250 website, and they are helping to amplify our message. The idea is that on April 19th, if someone were able to scan one of those QR codes, it would take you to a page that would have the transportation schedule, the parade map, all key information, like information booths, where are the bathrooms, food, so key information like that. So on that day, if someone scans one of the codes that will be readily available, they can access all that information.
Cameron, do you have any questions?
No, I mean, great job. I know that there's a lot of planning that's going into this. I know there's a lot of coordination with the other towns. I understand Lexington's worried about their parade starting at 2 o'clock, so they want to make sure everybody can get down the road and back to Lexington. But, that's just an example, right, of all the different work that I know is going into, not only within Concord, but making sure that it all sort of comes together across multiple towns. So thank you.
I have a question about communication. Now, I know you've got, thank you. I've got a question about communication. I know you've got good communication among your people, but have you given any thought to enabling cell phone service for the people who come to town in case we haven't figured that out ourselves?
Yeah, that is being, excuse me, that is being worked on, Mary. It's part of the communications working group, and we are working with the engineers at some of the top phone companies that'll bring cell towers. They're called cell on wheels. The
Yes.
cows are coming into
Exactly.
town, and they're going to be deployed in different locations around town. We're also working with their engineers to come up with a solution to some of the problems that we're anticipating downtown for the general public. So
Great.
they may have to drop lines into the ground, but we are working with them
Excellent.
right now. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
I do have actually one question. Would some of you be willing to come back to the select board in March or the beginning of April for a quick update? Just to remind, I'm sure there's a lot of people out there not listening tonight, but 2 weeks before the event, they might start thinking about it, and then they might want to know, where's the QR code, where's the satellite parking, and any updates.
The short answer is yes, absolutely. I think I have a standing invitation on a monthly basis, very much for that reason, because we have met with a number of the various stakeholders, business, faith communities, 3 or 4 times, yet new questions arise. It's not new questions, just questions arise as people are hearing about it for the first time. So, and as the chief said, I would reiterate tonight, we understand that Easter is the Sunday, the 20th of April, and the access to the religious faith institutions here, particularly in Monument Square, will be open for our members of those faith communities. Can I also just make the plug, we talked about transportation, and particularly if you're thinking about friends and guests from out of town arriving, I would strongly, strongly encourage that they take the commuter rail. We've worked hard with the MBTA. They've been very responsive. As the chief mentioned, they've increased the amount of rolling stock significantly. They'll have customer service representatives here on site. We'll have, Concord is in line to have the depot station platforms made fully accessible. That won't happen in a permanent sense, but they will bring in temporary structures to affect that. But take the train, and I'll just keep saying, take the train, please. It will make everyone's life just a little bit easier.
We will definitely have you back.
And then one additional comment. We are looking for people from the town, citizens all over town, to be ambassadors and to come and help us, serve as guideposts and say, oh, you need first aid, here's where you go. There will be a training, Fred, on February 11th? January 11th. Oh, thank you. There'll be training. I would have missed it entirely. No, January 11th, 3-hour training for people. Call in 3 hours in the morning or 3 hours in the afternoon. You can pick when you would like to attend. But please connect with us. Let us know that this is something you wish to do. I would urge you to go to the website, and just there's a place to sign up and say, yes, I'd love to be an ambassador. I'd love to participate. We're going to meet everybody's engagement positively and productively. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you. Really, we can't say thank you enough.
You're welcome.
You're welcome.
Really. We'll see you
Next month.
Next month. Next month. Great.
What's next?
MCI.
MCI is next.
Licenses.
That was good. That felt reassuring.
Yeah, these guys are really on
Yeah, they
fire.
are good, I guess. That's good to see something's working. Okay. Next up is, who's going to speak for MCI? You want to come up here?
Yeah.
So far away. Do it together. Okay.
All right, let's do it together. Let's do it live. Like the crowd's dwindling.
Do you want me to kind of set the stage?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay.
That'd be great.
Okay, I'll just start in here and then hand it over to the co-chair of the MCI Concord Advisory Board.
Great.
What we have before you is an ever-evolving document. It's a draft budget that reflects the two legislative earmarks that the town has received, one for $250,000 and one for $475,000, totaling in $725,000. And I think we've talked about this with this group, but we're thrilled to receive these funds. There's plenty of work to do. One caveat is that the funds do need to be spent by the end of June, and that is not encumbered. It means actually spent. So that's kind of one kind of boundary about these funds. So before you have a budget. It has been recommended to be adjusted slightly, and it includes two components. One is for consulting work for planning, economic, and market analysis that is being led by the MCI Advisory Board. And the second component is for analysis regarding wastewater treatment. And we have our Concord Public Works Director here as well, and member from the Public Works Commission, if there's any questions on that. But I'll hand it over to Patrick if you want to talk a little bit more about the consulting work that is included in here.
Thank you, Thank you, Megan. Good evening, everyone. My name is Patrick McCurdy. I'm co-chair of the MCI Advisory Board along with Dan Gainsborough, and I'm joined by John Boyton and Mark Howell. I'll be brief. As Megan alluded to, there are two major line items that will be budgeted for fiscal year 2025 that allocate the $725,000 earmarked for MCI Concord. The first is master planning and visioning for the site, which would be a comprehensive, or it is a comprehensive request for proposal, and includes everything from the project management, the visioning exercise, communications and community engagement, and will run through June 30th, 2025. That RFP is drafted and has been drafted by the advisory board and is now with the town finance office for review and then issuance later this year or early next. The second major line item is, as Megan mentioned, focused on the wastewater treatment plant, which is currently owned and operated by the state, and is located on the MCI property. Concord Public Works has been actively assessing that site along with DCAM, and has worked with a consulting partner to develop a scope of work to further assess in the next level of detail, I would say, to determine the state of the facility, its future, and kind of its potential future uses and needs. That second piece, the wastewater treatment plant, is seen as a critical and first step in any redevelopment plans. So the two are quite compatible. In terms of the allocation of the 725 across those two line items, the master planning line item is allocated $440,000, which includes a 10% contingency, so 440 total, but 10% given that the RFP has not been issued yet, we do not know exactly where the responses will come in. And the remainder is then allocated to the wastewater treatment effort, which is $285,000. I'll pause there if there are any comments or questions.
Yeah, sorry, I'm trying to tie out to the numbers that you just mentioned. So I'm looking at a slide here. It says the consultant is 350.
Yeah, I can speak to that,
Okay,
Karen.
all right. No, that's all. I heard you say 440.
Yeah,
and,
this-
and I was like,
This
oh,
is,
I'm 350.
this document was submitted last week, and the MCI Advisory Board met again today at noon. I'm sorry, I failed to kind of
I'm
outline
behind.
that specifically.
Okay.
No,
Gotcha.
it's happening in real time. So
Okay.
this was a proposal that was put together in front of just to do the timing.
Yep.
The Advisory Board today, and through discussion with the Advisory Board, they felt more comfortable increasing the component for the consulting work to 440 or 400 with the contingency.
Okay.
And there was also a discussion to,
But sorry, did it cut out any of the wastewater pieces then, or?
well, it does kind of shift the numbers around, because so if that's 440, then 285 is remaining for wastewater efforts. So it's really, this was the original plan. Now the bucket's into two. There's a 440 for planning, and then there's a 285 for wastewater.
Yeah.
And the discussion included taking some of the conceptual plan for a CPW facility, which is the last item on the budget that's in the packet, and incorporating some of that feasibility or some of that conceptual planning into the kind of the master planning effort. So there's going to be a change in this budget to be two different buckets: 440 for the planning, 285 for wastewater treatment. And this discussion here today was at the request of the select board to kind of share what the advisory board and staff is working on. And after we discuss it today, the next step would be to enter into the contract with the Executive Office of Economic Development so that the funds can become available, so that we can enter into these contracts and do the work in the remaining time.
So I have a question about that last item, the conceptual plan for the CPW facility. Do you mean a wastewater treatment facility, or do you mean possibly locating the whole CPW down at MCI? Sure.
The latter is what I meant, and the advisory board received a white paper from myself at their last meeting, thinking about, or asking the advisory board to consider thinking about Concord Public Works as a component at the campus. It talked about some of the, I can send it around to this board as well. It talked about some of the pros and cons in considering that option, what it could mean for unlocking Kais Road for potential development, how it could be a use that is compatible with the wastewater treatment plant. And so when we were trying to build this budget around what could be feasible, what could be done this year, it was an element that was recommended to be considered.
So as Megan mentioned, that is no longer an independent budgeted line item. It has been incorporated into the master planning and visioning item in one consolidated perspective.
So I understand that you need a budget in order to get the funds released, and you need a budget that shows spending all the money by June 30th, right? But it almost seems like we need two budgets. One is for that effort, and another is to really find out what do we think it's really going to cost to get this work done after that arbitrary June 30th day. Because I just have doubts whether realistically you're going to be able to spend 440 by June 30th. I understand the recommendation that we earmark it. So let me get to my question. My question is, first, do you think it's a valid exercise to put together a real budget? I mean, a budget that doesn't have this arbitrary June 30th drop-off date. And would that be useful to you? And second of all, if you get the RFP back, the bids back, and you see that you can get this work done for a lot less than the $400,000 you have earmarked, will you have an opportunity to then make those funds available to work that was on the original budget for wastewater treatment or other ancillary things that are going to be impacted within that area because of this project. Do you see my question?
I do. So I heard two in there, Mary, so I'll take them in that order. On the first question, yes, I think we absolutely need to determine the full budget, if you will. Until we have a starting point, I think that is almost impossible. I mean, we could come up with really high level estimates, but you could imagine that depending on the kind of infinite number of possibilities that the redevelopment can go, it would be, the cost estimates would vary extremely widely, including not knowing actually what's on the site yet and in the ground there. Okay. And so I think we are, as an advisory board, expecting that this first piece of work, if you will give us a sense of what is possible to then be able to put together a more comprehensive budget that has kind of a multi-year plan with it. On the second question, I believe so, right? So the intention would be that we should have, we're scheduled to have bids back for the master planning RFP on January 27th, at which point we could then determine if it comes in under the 440, what other needs are there related to that site, and of course would be looking to actively allocate them. Especially, I know Public Works and the wastewater site came in, as you see in this exhibit, above the 285.
Right.
So we would probably start there with the reallocation, presumably.
Yeah, I'm thinking that's good because we know that they've got work ready to go.
Right.
And we do know that we do have this June 30th date to spend some money. So I'm glad to hear that you're open.
Of course.
As you look good.
Yeah. Okay. The awkwardness of this presentation is driven by a couple of things that were baked into the legislation that the state passed in the first place. One of them being that the state was required to offer the wastewater treatment facility to the town and has already done that. And so we're in a period of reviewing that offer and deciding what's in the town's best interest. So the wastewater treatment facility and therefore the public works implications of taking on that new facility are running a little bit ahead of anything else with much more specificity than any other part of this project at this stage of the game. And that's actually a good thing because wastewater is such a critical factor for community development, whether it be housing, whether it be commercial use, or just about anything else you want to do. We are at capacity in our wastewater today, and so it's very useful for us to be able to understand what the constraints are and the opportunities for wastewater early in this process, because that'll inform a lot of what else is going on. The other thing is, and we're very, very grateful to our legislators for providing these state funds in the first place, but the state funds did come with a fairly lengthy delay on their availability, a requirement that one submits a budget in order to get into contract for their use, and this need to expend them by a certain period of time, which nobody listening to this conversation should assume that this process is going to be anywhere near over by June 30th. This tranche of monies from the state will need to be spent by then or expires at that point. But after that, then how we get to, you'll notice the word zoning is absent from this budget. How we get to zoning, how we get to the planning, those are questions which the advisory board is impaneled to engage in and simply can't in any practical sense be adequately addressed in the timeframes that we're talking about for this budget, which is really about how to use those state funds right now. But yes, the point is that we do need to build a broader project plan, and the sooner the advisory board is focused on doing that at the same time.
That's good.
And I recall there's a date by which we have to vote as a select board, I think, to agree on the wastewater plant? Is that February?
February, yeah. We have to
Yeah, there was a
respond to that.
180-day response.
We have to
time.
respond.
It's something like February,
that,
Terry,
yeah.
if I remember.
Yeah, no,
But we would have to get an
Alan-
extension to go to town meeting.
Yes.
Very
So
soft.
Alan Cathcart, Public Works Director.
Yeah.
Regarding the opportunity for the town to take ownership, we do need to negotiate with DCAM. We've had conversations with them informally. They understand that if the town is going to proceed, we're going to do it with due diligence. You know, they understand that any dialogue, any commitment is going to be conditioned. And so that's what we're in the process of sort of sorting through as we speak. I think our intent is to come back to the select board in January to update so that we have a little bit of time to think about what is the strategy that we are negotiating with DCAM.
Yep.
I felt very comfortable after a conversation where they seemed to have a better understanding of realistic timetables and schedules. And I would just offer that the wastewater treatment plant has to operate today and tomorrow for the state's purpose. They know that. So there's not going to be any rash decisions, but I think it's a partnership with the town. They've expressed a willingness to have this conversation, and we're going to do it with our eyes wide open. You know, that's why we did a facility plan already, looking at the existing conditions, and that's why we're trying to accelerate some of this work that might not otherwise have been done, but it'll only move that understanding and commitment faster for both DCAM and the town, having some of those answers that we presently don't have outside of the treatment facility specifically. We're talking about looking at potential sand beds that have been decommissioned and potentially looking at opportunities there for expanding capacity. We're talking about interconnections with the town's existing system. That's very real. We need to understand those costs so that any negotiations we have, we're looking at it, fully loaded. What is the expense to the town before we make a final commitment? So it's a longer answer, but I want to give you context that they are willing to work with us, and we will come back in January giving you a little bit better framework of what we think that letter of commitment or whatever it may look like in February should be.
Ellen, what do we need to do at town meeting? What kind of
There's a
authorization?
concept at this point, and
Yep.
we haven't really going to discuss it at the Public Works Commission on Wednesday.
Yep.
We have identified over the next 10 years, and really the next 15, 20, $25 million of investment. We know that facility, in order to continue to operate as is, for the state, needs a few $1,000,000 at least to keep it running and operable. We know that if it's going to serve anything beyond the state's needs, we're going to be putting in more money. That's where we have to look at, does the town want to contemplate a borrowing? Do we consider, and this is the discussion with DCAM we need to have, are they willing to front money that we might manage to bring the facility into operable conditions and compliance? And so these discussions where they're real time, and unfortunately or not, I think we're strategic. We just need to have DCAM sort of on the other side of this conversation, so when we come in February, we'll be a little bit better positioned to volunteer what we need to do. But if we're going to spend that kind of money, we understand the state's partner, and they're going to have to contribute sooner rather than the town. But ultimately, the town's going to have to invest money, and then the people who are going to pay for that bond or whatever improvements are going to be the users, whether it's the redevelopment of that campus or redevelopment of the town outside of the campus, but at least we're getting some economic growth and development, which is what we don't really have the luxury of today.
Thank you. Any other questions for
I have a follow-up for Alan, actually. So on this chart from MCI, which is a really good start, there's a lot of work that's listed as being done by CPW. And we also heard tonight that you guys are going to be busy with the 250th, sidewalk decals, and you have your regular spring work. Like, do you really have the resources to do all of this work, especially by June 30th?
Yes, that's broken down by tasks, working with our consultant. So we have a consultant on board who knows the schedule, and all these tasks are very realistic for us.
Okay, great.
So, any questions for Patrick?
So as it relates to the RFP and the scope of the RFP, how realistic is it that we're going to be able to accomplish what you're setting out to do?
We intend very much so. That we wrote the advisory board has spent the last month or so, really dialing in that RFP to be quite specific to accomplish this visioning and master planning exercise. So, as Mark alluded to, you'll notice that nowhere does it say zoning, right? So it is quite specific in what it's trying to accomplish. So I would say very.
Off.
Awesome.
Sorry about that.
Sorry,
No,
Wendy.
so that's great. I was just concerned because it's taken a while to get it done, and you've got basically, if the RFP is not coming in until the end of January, you've got 5 months to actually get that work done. It's a lot to do. So
That's what I'm saying, that the work does not fit into the time frame.
right, but you have to spend the money.
But what we needed to do was produce a budget for the purpose of getting into contract with the Executive Office of Economic Development
Right.
to utilize, it's really is specific to how we're going to utilize the $725,000 of state earmark funding that our legislatures secured for us. That should not be confused with either the time frame or the cost of this entire planning process,
Yes.
which is yet to be determined.
Right, so this is just the first step in the
Yes.
visioning piece. So I guess it will be interesting to hear what that larger time frame will be.
I have,
Yeah,
I have a question for Megan.
Just to
Go
finish
ahead. Go
my
ahead.
thought on that, to your point about what should we be thinking about for town meeting, we'll need to be thinking in our budget process about how to make sure that this advisory board doesn't end up stranded like it kind of did this fiscal year, with sort of no money and no way to spend funds for a good portion of the year, hoping that something else comes in. So we're going to have to come up with a mechanism whereby whatever scope is eventually contracted for this actually can be supported by an appropriation from somewhere, and that discussion is just starting.
Yes, we're going to have to, and we're going to have to think about that in January, because as we know, the warrant closes in February, the middle of February. So we're going to have to put some placeholders in there for funds from wherever, but we don't want to leave you stranded. We don't want the property to lay idle for 10 years because we stalled in our process. So,
But also, isn't there, the potential that we would be asking for approval to go negotiate for the wastewater?
That's another story. Yeah.
that's another.
That's just another thing, that's what I'm saying, it's another possibility for
Yes.
town
So-
meeting.
yes.
It's another
Yes,
another
exactly.
possibility.
So there's at least two.
Right.
At least
The
two.
wastewater
Yes.
treatment facility acquisition
And-
could potentially come, but a budget for
Is
the
also
program.
totally separate, yes.
Yes.
It's an
plan
and.
is-
Right.
But is
I
there
have-
a possibility of, like if we enter into a contract with a consultant and the funds are encumbered and they're partially spent by June 30th, then it may be,
No. So
be
so far,
negotiated
not
to
currently.
carry forward.
so far the answer to that has been
Right,
no.
so far, I know.
No,
Okay.
no.
So back to my question, Megan, you might know this. So if we put this budget together for the EOED that shows the 725 broken down by these 2 or 3 line items, and we find out that the 440, we can reallocate that to another effort, can we do that?
Yes.
Okay.
And I've been in touch with the Office of Economic Development, and I plan to finalize the paperwork to submit our budget so we can enter into the contract tomorrow. And they are really looking for broad categories. Like this one is it's incorrect and it's a little bit more specific, but we'll do broad categories, and we're going to have to do additional follow-up reporting and submitting invoices, and there's a lot of information that the state will be receiving, and it can be adjusted, but the bottom line will be the same. And I think
the categories in general are along the same lines as what the community is looking for.
Good news.
So,
Thank you.
Mary, you've mentioned a couple of times community outreach when we've talked about MCI.
Yep.
So I mean, it's another, I don't know if that's part of
It is.
that.
It is, Kim.
Okay,
So
it's
yeah,
covered in that bucket.
There's, I think, 4 major sections of the RFP, 4 or 5, and that's
Okay, so that's
that's one of the
Yep.
main
Okay,
sections.
and then my only other comment is just the last words on that first description, which is, and ensure alignment with community goals. Only because, so does that mean that the committee has sort of defined the spectrum of community? Do you know what I mean? Like I could go probably ask 10 people, what are the community goals for MCI? I might get 12 different answers, right?
Yeah.
So just understanding like the breadth of what we're asking for as the potential scope.
Yeah, so I would say 2 things on that, and I welcome Dan's input as well. One is, as part of the RFP, as I just mentioned, community engagement and outreach is central to the effort to incorporate the community's input. As a placeholder, we have used, you got to help me, Dan, we used a recent
Got it, okay.
Vision 2030 as the criteria in that as kind of a placeholder, if you will, or starting point to define the community.
Yeah, so they have something to work from,
Exactly.
and they can adjust it as they're getting further community
Exactly.
input. Okay, that's great.
But that was drafted a few years ago, so we used that as a starting point.
Great. Thanks.
So do we, do we have a motion to approve this budget as far as submitting it to the EOED?
We don't have a motion. I suppose we could express support for it. And I'd be happy to move that we express support for the budget as presented and discussed for the MCI Concord Advisory Board efforts.
I'd like to make it a vote.
Okay.
Do I have,
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Very good. So thank you. And I'd also like to invite you back in February because, again, as I keep saying, the warrant closes on February 19th. So we've got to get an update. You'll know then what the bids are coming in at, how much work you can get done. You'll have more information. So if you can come back and talk to us, I think we have a hard stop at February 19th, so we need to keep talking.
Yeah.
Okay?
Sounds great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Okay, Shannon.
Very good.
You got your choice.
I'll say it in a second, so we'll let
That
Shannon.
went well.
All right.
Hi, Shannon.
Hi. So you have this memo in your packet for the second batch of your annual license renewals.
Yep.
A couple of things that I'd just like to highlight that I was waiting to put with the last batch were some updates about business activity during 2024. So there was one new business that opened, which was Bandoleros. They have a liquor license and a common victualler license. The cheese shop transferred their liquor license, but it is still operating as the cheese shop, so that doesn't affect the quota. And then there was one business that closed, which was Reasons to be Cheerful, and they just had a common victualler license. And Mary asked me to give a breakdown about the quota. So Concord has 35 total liquor licenses that they can issue. Right now, we have 28 total that are issued. The way the ABCC breaks that down are on-premise licensees, which are restaurant licenses, and then off-premise licenses, which are essentially package stores, and those are broken down by all alcohol or wine and malt beverages only. So heading into 2025, we will have 5 all-alcohol restaurant licenses available. There is 1 wine and malt beverages only restaurant license available, but that is tied to special legislation, meaning that the location of that premises is dictated, and that's Verrill Farm, explicitly in the legislation. Yes, so that's very specific. And then for off-premise licenses, for all alcoholic beverages, there are none available, and there is 1 wine and malt beverages off-premise license available.
I wonder if you could put that in a table for me?
Yeah, it exists in a table. It exists in a table.
Could you just send that to
Yeah.
me, Shannon? I couldn't, couldn't collect all that right now. That would be very helpful.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Yeah.
thank you. So what do you need from us?
We need,
Motion to approve all of
the-
these licenses.
The 2025 annual license renewals, batch 2, is published in our packet, which includes, I believe, this is the list, right?
Yep.
Yep.
6 Class 2 licenses, 23 common particular licenses, 1 in-holder lodging license, 16 liquor licenses, and 29 tour guides and 5 entertainment licenses.
I think we got the last two,
place.
so I think for the common victular licenses, we have all 24.
Yeah,
We
there
got
was
that
one more that I added
And you got-
this afternoon.
And you got Ed, and you got Edward too,
Mhm.
right?
Okay.
So the numbers for
30.
change.
It's updated in your packet
Yeah,
online.
There you go.
Good.
Okay,
Thank you.
Okay.
Second.
All in favor? All in favor?
Aye.
Very good. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
You do.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Very good. Thank you very much. We did a lot of work tonight.
Yes, we did.